Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is a Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 89.
All right, Ben. You are a seminary teacher, as you like to profess constantly on this podcast. You served as a missionary for 2 years of your life. One of the greatest experiences, as you say.
You're like setting me up for failure here, aren't you?
Whenever we do our mastermind episodes, you're always wanting to be quizzed on LDS doctrine.
Okay.
And so, Ben, I have a very short quiz for you on the New Testament.
Okay, New Testament. Go ahead.
Okay. How many books are in the New Testament?
Is it 89?
It's not 89 books, no.
I mean, I can sing a little song, but you're probably not going to be very tolerant of that.
So I'm looking for a number, not a song. Ben's counting on his fingers now. It's really fun. It's like trying to watch an ape calculate how much pocket change to throw at the people at the zoo.
22.
Ooh,
Damn.
27.
Oh.
You held up one whole
I
hand
didn't count
and
one of the fives.
Yeah. I was watching you count on your fingers. Yes, you got it right. You just said the wrong number. Okay, 27 books in the New Testament. Good job. How are those books divided, typically, into larger groups?
In the New Testament? Okay, there's the Gospels, the first four. Then there's the Acts of the Apostles. And then there's the... they're divided by author. There's Peter and...
Oh, not that level. You're doing good with the Gospels and the Apostles and the Acts.
Okay, and then the epistles.
Epistles and...
Revelation.
The Apocalypse, that's right.
Yeah.
Damn, you're doing a lot better on this than I thought you were going to.
Okay.
All right, so how many chapters are in the New Testament?
Is this 89? No, that can't be right. 200.
260.
Okay.
Okay, what group... Of the ones we talked about, the Gospels, the Acts, the Epistles, and the Apocalypse, which group has the most chapters?
The Epistles.
The Gospels, actually. Yeah, the Epistles is a close second, though. It's off by like 2.
Okay.
Now, how many chapters do you think are in the Gospels?
I'm going to keep guessing 89.
This is the one. We finally drill down. There are 89 chapters in the Gospels. It's
all right.
the most number of chapters in one section of the New Testament.
Well, that's great because this week I start back up in seminary, and guess what book we're studying this year?
The Old Testament.
The New Testament.
Oh, I was so close. Okay, Ben, before you go off on some random, taking control of the podcast, I actually have some follow-up that I'd like to do.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so this happened many, many weeks ago, but I mentioned on the podcast that my wife had made her delicious mulled cider for the holidays, and I drank 5 gallons of that cider over the course of the month of December, and I didn't regret any of it.
Yeah?
And I was drinking Fireball in the cider.
Yeah, which is like cinnamon-flavored whiskey.
Cinnamon-flavored whiskey, yeah. And the cinnamon paired very, very nicely with the cider. But I was, if I'm being honest with myself, I was slightly dissatisfied with, if I overdosed it with whiskey, whiskey bite would really come through and start drowning out the nice spices and the smoothness and the rich holiday flavor. And I'd get too much alcohol burn. And I know you don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
But then on the Reddit, I actually got a suggestion from one of our listeners, from UJO. Shout out to UJO. He recommended Tuaca, which is a thing that I had never heard of. And it took me several weeks, but I actually found myself at a Bevmo. And I'm like, I am supposed to buy something here. And I scrolled through the Reddit and I found the post. And I found they had one kind, and it was called Tuaca. And it's like a brandy.
Okay.
So and I came back, and my last batch of cider that my wife made, I decided to try it with the Tuaca instead of the Fireball. And Ben, I was so pleasantly surprised. It gave me there were all these problems with Fireball that I didn't even recognize because I was just enjoying it so much, and I had nothing to compare it to. I was just enjoying the experience. But now that I've had Tuaca in my apple cider, I don't think I can do Fireball again. It was like smooth and smoky, and it just really enhanced the whole thing. And just a huge shout out and a thank you to UJL.
Okay, you know what I love about that story? I love that listener, they just kind of, it was almost like throwaway, like, hey, I heard you say you tried this, you should try this instead. And that it just planted a little seed in your brain that was waiting for its moment. And then when the moment came, then you did it.
Yes. I had my office lunch at some random restaurant that happened to be across the street from a Bevmo. And as I'm sitting there eating appetizers, pretending to listen to my coworkers, I looked and I saw the Bevmo, and it clicked. And that seed that UJO had planted in the Reddit sprouted into an idea, which blossomed and delivered this fruit of delicious holiday treat.
Awesome. Well, great. That's a good story. People tell me that kind of story about the podcast sometimes. They'll be like, oh, man, you never believe it. Like, I was in the drive-thru the other day, and they asked me to pull forward, and all I could think about was you guys.
That's going to be our claim to fame. That's what's going to put us on the map right there, Ben, is just don't pull forward in the drive-thru.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite disc golfers just changed sponsors after 10 years with the same sponsor this week. It doesn't matter what he is or what all that's about. But I was thinking about it, and one thing he always says is whenever he makes a really good long shot, like a 100-foot putt, and it goes right in, he goes, twice or it's luck. And then he throws another one. And if he makes it, then he celebrates. But if he doesn't, he's like, I guess I got lucky. And now whenever I make a good long shot, I always think that, twice or it's luck.
Oh, that's nice. Kind of bring your humility down before you start thinking you're too big for your britches.
Yeah. But if you make it twice, then you're pretty hot stuff.
Then you are just the hot stuff, and those britches are just fine.
All right, Josh, I also had a holiday dilemma I wanted to tell you about. So as you know, we traveled out to Utah, which is 1,400 miles away from my home in Louisiana. Luckily, we left as like the winter storm apocalypse was hitting like all of the northern tier states and just kind of skirted south and came back home.
The what now? You're talking about that big purple thing that was on all the news channels
that didn't make its way down to Arizona, yes.
No, it was a glorious 75 degrees on Christmas Day.
Yeah. So we got back to Louisiana and unpacked all our bags and got out our Christmas gifts. And every year my family and my siblings does a Christmas gift exchange where we just, in order to simplify it, instead of making everyone feel like they have to give gifts for everyone, we just only give a gift to one person and it rotates each year.
Okay.
So my sister had given me a gift, and it was very thoughtful because she'd come here. She's a listener to the podcast. I want to say that up front because I'm about to talk about her in a way where I'm kind of saying sensitive things, and I just want to know. I want you to know I've thought this through.
Okay. Yeah, because I like to shut you down when you don't think things through.
Yeah. I've thought this through. So she'd come here for Thanksgiving, and we just lacked a reliable thermometer for like measuring the temperature of our food as we're preparing all the various Thanksgiving dishes.
Okay.
So she got me this lovely high-end computerized thermometer that has both a probe and an infrared sensor. Top-notch, super cool gift. And then
the gift only a dad will appreciate.
Oh, I love it. Anyway, in the package with it, there was a cute little cheeky note that said, if this fails, here's a backup plan, and it was a couple of DoorDash gift cards.
Oh, nice. That's very thoughtful, too.
Yeah. So I got back home, and I was like, I should probably deposit these into my DoorDash account before I lose them. So I turned them over, and I scratched off the little silver strips, and I typed in the numbers for the first one, and it says that's been a deposit to your account. And I typed in the number for the second one, and it said, oops, this isn't working right now. Try back later, which I'd like to gripe, first of all, about that error message. It actually said the word oops and try again later, which is a false negative. You know, it didn't tell me what the real problem was.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a good general catch-all error message. All right, you're talking to a computer scientist?
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of ways computers can break.
But you know how it is. You scratch off the strip and you got these things and you can't tell if they're all letters or numbers, but there weren't any like 8s that were being mistaken for B's or anything like that. Like I tried a few alternate combinations, but it was all caps and it was letters and then numbers and it wasn't at all confusing. I tried a few variations and just kept giving the same error message. If I hadn't had a second gift card, I might have thought they were having some kind of system issue. But it worked just...
Yeah, maybe it's down for maintenance.
Right, but it worked just fine with the other gift card.
Well, maybe they brought it down for maintenance and the time it took you to get the new card out.
So here's the like etiquette dilemma that started to arise. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? Well, I guess the first thing is probably I have to say the dollar amount.
Well, I'm okay. Yes. What was was it a high dollar amount? Was it
yes, they were each $50.
Okay, yeah, significant.
So it wasn't a $5 gift card. If it was a $5 gift card, I would have just thrown it away and forgot, paid myself $5.
Oh.
but they were each $50, and I was like, crap, what do I do? So
Well, the error message said try again later. Did you come back and try again later?
yes, I did, but I also had the other card that worked right away. First try, no problems. And
You keep emphasizing that. That's not what the error message said. It
So
said come back later.
it had some little like micro text with a really long URL, which is also terrible. But I navigated to their website, and they had one of those little things in the corner. It was like, click here to chat with a representative.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, let's try this. So I chatted with the representative, and I told them, and they came back, and they must have had one of those internal corporate policies to never tell a customer no.
Oh, gosh.
But I could tell by what they were telling me that this gift card hadn't been activated.
Okay. The gift card that, it hadn't gone through the scanner at the store.
Yeah, you know how when you're in the checkout line at the grocery store, you buy them, and if they don't scan them at the checkout, then it's not valid. You can't just steal gift cards off the shelf and stick them in your pocket.
Right. It has to go through the point of sale system before it becomes actual currency. Otherwise, people would drive their Jeeps into the front of a Fry's food and drug and just steal that whole shelf.
Yeah, I mean that's how those Indian scammers get their money, is like gift cards from Target.
That's money laundering 101 right there.
So my sister is a very conscientious person. I'm thinking, okay, did she? There's a few What do you think the possibilities are? What would you have been thinking at this point?
Okay, so what immediately comes to mind is three things. I'm going to say three things. The first one is when she grabbed your first gift card. Like she maybe intended to give you two, but then the checkout person only mistakenly took the stack of them for one and maybe just rang out the one that was on the bottom and then passed both of them down the line. And she accidentally stole a $50 gift card that was now worthless because it wasn't activated.
Right.
The second thing that could have happened is she activated both gift cards and then used one and then gave you the used one for funsies. Because just to get a rise out of it.
You have to scratch off the little silver strip, and it wasn't scratched off. But that's a funny one.
Oh, you can put those back on. The third option is your sister is possibly a closet kleptomaniac that randomly steals small dollar item things as she's going about her day just to get like the excitement and the adrenaline.
Okay, well, you didn't say the possibility that I was considering, and that there was just some kind of system error that could be overridden administratively. Like what is the possibility that this was paid for and it's just not working?
Well, we don't have visibility on the back end of how these gift cards are activated through DoorDash.
I know, and there's no way to fix that if that's actually it, other than what we've kind of talked about in the past, which is appealing to someone high enough in the chain of command that has the authority to basically give you $50 in order to make you happy.
Yeah, but how much of a rabble do you have to rouse with DoorDash to get somebody to just give you $50? Because here's the thing. The other side of this equation is some dude is calling me out of the blue and saying, you owe me $50, give me my $50.
No, you're absolutely right. I would have definitely had to get a lot higher. And I just realized I'd gone that far, and I hung up. I closed the thing when I realized I wasn't going to get any further with the agent on DoorDash's website. And then I was staring at the two gift cards, and I thought, okay, do I just let this go? Here's the problem. What if she did spend the $50 on it, and I'm just gonna throw it away?
Well, now let's analyze this from the different steps. Like her utility of the $50 was giving you a gift,
right?
So all of her utility is expended. She's good to go.
Yes.
So this is only talking about you.
I know.
You had a thing that was given to you for free, and you're offended that you didn't get the full expected utility from it.
The word offended is an oversimplification of it.
You're upset that the system is broken in a way that deprived you of $50.
Yes. That's more of it. Also, I'd like to think that she'd rather that I have it than not.
No, you're putting a lot of onus on her. Like I said, she's out of this. She has nothing to do with whether or not this gift card ever produces.
Okay, I want to add a wrinkle to this. Not only was she out of this, but she was stranded in a hotel in Rock Springs, Wyoming, because I-80 was closed in both directions.
Oh, so she was like out of this, had already gotten her utility from it, and completely like incognito, like totally out of communication.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had Wi-Fi, but they were just stuck, which was, in a respect, she had a lot to worry about, but also they were just sitting around not doing anything because the freeway was closed and they couldn't go anywhere.
So what would you have done? Would you called them and been like, oh, hey, remember that $50 gift card? Well, it didn't work. You are a terrible sister.
Yeah, so I'll let that story be what I said, because she knows what I actually said. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I was like,
Wait, you actually called and told her all
Yes.
this? Why? Why, Ben? She's out of it. She's gone. She's like living a better life. And then what? You called to complain that the thing you gave me is broken?
So I posed it in the form of a question. I'm like, does your receipt show that you paid $100 for these?
Dude, all I can think about is just how much plaque that horse had that you gave me a couple of years back. Like, seriously, man, come on. You did not have to include her.
You're right. I didn't. I hope she can forgive me. So, I don't. If you want to reverse roles here and think, what would I do now if the person had come to me with this dilemma? I'd be like, oh crap, I gave somebody a defective gift. I mean, you can kind of abstract this into other scenarios. Like, what if you'd given somebody a defective gift and they called you and asked for the receipt so they could take it back and get it replaced with one that's working?
If somebody called me and said that, they would hear. This would be close to my exact words. It's like, okay. So it's going to sound like I'm hanging up, but hang up.
Yeah. Well, she was generous, and she checked her receipt and found that it was probably like you said, where the cashier had only swiped one of them and thrown them both in the bag, and she sent me another one. And
now hang on.
Now I'm deeply in her debt.
Hang on.
From both
hang on. Let's break that down for a second, Mr. Ben. Too good for his own. Like for the rest of us here. You called. Let's switch roles.
It
for
was
a
a text.
Someone calls you, and they say, "Hey, remember that $100 gift that you gave me? Actually, only $50 of it worked. Can you check your receipt?" Now, you, Ben, you're on the phone with this person that's just trying to troubleshoot a situation and realizing that you might not have given them as much as you thought you had. You look at your receipt and you see the full $100, but they are saying they've only got 50 of it. What do? Now your dilemma is,
I
you're
like
right.
this version
This
of the
only
trolley
says
problem.
50.
I guess.
What if she flat out lied to you and sent you another $50 just to satiate your desire to have $100 in DoorDash?
On behalf of the corporation for a stranger and on behalf of a sibling in a family. Like, there's my brother trying to get money out of me again.
The common thread here is it's just against you. Like, it doesn't matter who I'm for. It's just not you, buddy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I was just staring at him thinking, what do I do here? There's so many possibilities. I could just forget all about it. I could take it up harder with the company, or I could involve my sister. But I don't know about you with the people that you love, but you can't control what they're going to do once you give them the information.
Well, and
I was willing to accept that possibility.
And that's kind of where we're at. Is what level do you give the information to this person that you're having problems with the thing that they gave you? And obviously, we're drawing lines in different directions. Like, you are trying to make sure that everybody in the entire chain of purchase to fulfillment of this gift card has the maximum utility promised by the corporation or whoever.
Right.
Make sure every step of the process worked correctly. You're just working the problem.
Yeah.
Me. All right, so there's this great concept in accounting. Random Josh.
What's it called? I can't wait to know.
Basis. Okay, there's this idea like when you make an investment, whatever you initially put out for that investment, that is your basis in the investment.
Okay.
This is how much you have at stake. Okay?
From a psychological point of view, or just simply an accounting thing?
It can be both. But specifically when I'm dealing with it with clients, it is an accounting thing. Okay, how much did you pay for the car?
What was your basis?
Okay, you don't get to say that the car is worth $60,000 more than you paid for it just because you think it is. What you paid for it is what you're getting taxed on, not how much you think you should be taxed on. Anyway, so but the idea is that you have a thing, an asset, be it tangible or intangible, and you laid out something for it. That is what you have invested into it, okay? You were given a gift card worth potentially $50. But you, sir, had zero basis in it. You had nothing invested in this thing. So even if the card didn't work, even if you scratched off the little thing on the back and it said, go dunk your head in the lake or something, like you haven't lost anything because you don't have anything invested in it.
Yeah. Okay. So let me reverse this on you. Wouldn't you feel like you'd lost something if someone gave you something that was supposed to have value and it didn't? Or you're like, oh, well, it didn't cost me anything anyway. Because this is a famous flaw in a lot of psychological experiments that are now coming under a great deal of scrutiny. Okay. Psychologists have frequently done different versions of what they call altruism experiments, where they'll take a student in a lab and they'll give them $20 and then ask them to give it away to strangers. And they've shown themselves to be very unattached to that $20 that wasn't theirs before they got there.
Right.
And they think that that's measuring something, but they're not asking them to pull out their wallet and give away $20 that they made.
Right. Well, but that's all right. So it goes back to the question I asked you at the beginning, or,
Yeah.
or when I pointed out where the utility of this thing is coming from. Because me being handed a $50 gift card, that's a windfall. I have nothing invested in this. And like I would try to put the number in. I might mess around with chat for a little while, but other than that, this is all the time that I'm spending trying to get it to work. Is me investing basis into something that has no value.
Nice.
But
so my basis at that point is just how much emotion and time I've invested in trying to figure it out.
Yes, you had no basis for something that's theoretically worthless, and now you're pouring more investment into it. Like, at what point do you just cut your losses?
then I'm subject to the sunk cost fallacy.
Exactly. But then, like that's cut that off there, and like from the perspective of the person that gave it to me, they already got, like I mentioned, they've got their utility. Their utility was not that I got to eat $50 worth of food.
No, it's
their
giving
utility
a generous
was the
gift.
gratification of giving the gift.
Yeah.
That's right.
I know. Okay, I like this ideal that you've painted. I don't think you or I are this person, but I like this ideal of the kind of person where you could give them a gift that appeared to have great worth, and then if it didn't have any worth, could still receive the full amount of gratification from the generosity of the gift.
The intent.
Yeah, the intent.
Ben, we've been talking about this for I don't know how long now. And I just realized it can all be summed up by the classic gift-giving analogy that everybody says to every little kid everywhere.
What is it?
It's the thought that counts.
It's the thought that counts. Thank you, dear sister, for the generous gift. All right,
now
Josh.
that we're done like performing dentistry on that horse.
There's something that happens sometimes on the podcast. I think probably more to me than you, and that is you are very patient with me when I interrupt you or move on too quickly, and you've made a very intelligent, coherent thought. But one benefit we have from the fact that we've recorded our conversations and I listened to it again 2 or 3 times is that I get a second or third chance to hear your brilliant thought and process it.
Oh.
So I want to talk about one that you made a couple episodes ago, and I had some cognitive and emotional reasons that I was resistant at the time that I've now overcome.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Interesting. Okay. Yes, please.
Okay. You were making an important point in the context of the military, but I want to extend it. I want to extend the scope of this about how we identify limitations that individuals might have, and then we make ways to accommodate those limitations. But sometimes there's cultural inertia and bad feelings towards those accommodations that resist them or even negatively stigmatize them.
This is interesting that you're bringing this back up because my wife actually brought this up after she listened to that episode of the podcast as well. Because,
okay, go ahead.
She works at, it doesn't matter where she works. She's in the upper echelons.
She's in HR.
She's in HR, upper echelons. And one of the things that she deals with on a daily basis is employee accommodations for a large organization.
Right, which is a generic way of saying anything you would do that is to make a reasonable accommodation for something.
People come to her all the time with doctor's requests or doctor's notes saying, hey, this person is having problems with their legs. It would be better if they could sit in a more comfortable chair more of the time. Is there any way they could get a better chair? And then the organization, and she's part of the bureaucracy of the organization determining if they can accommodate that problem or that change that this person has or this shortcoming or this hardcoming or this injury, this mental illness, whatever. People come to her all the time. And it's frustrating to her, and she brought this up, that she's working this all the time and that she's constantly having to fight with the management, the operational management of these people, because she has to call and be like, hey, this person has this issue. They are requesting this accommodation. What do you think about that? And usually the knee-jerk reaction from the operation manager is, no, that's ridiculous. They're here to do their job. And then it's my wife, unfortunately, that has to talk them down like, no, that's not how this works. Like, we're going to try, like, if we can change things a little bit so they can still do their job, we should do that first.
Okay, so without just casting negative dispersions on the person that has that knee-jerk reaction, what is the logical basis for that reaction?
From what she has told me and from what I saw in the Air Force, it's always some kind of personal bias. It's always like, especially, I'm going to talk about my own experiences now because I don't want to speak for her. But I remember in the Air Force, people being so up in arms about anybody that couldn't do portions of the physical fitness test because they had some kind of physical ailment. It's like, oh, that person's had that freaking piece of paper for 6 months now. They need to, fix themselves and actually go do it. I'm like, hang on. He has a legitimate, like medical condition that a doctor has said he cannot run for the next year. How are you going to try to penalize him by creating this negative perception of this person, like it's their fault, like they're just being lazy? You don't know.
So those are pervasive. When I first got my shaving waiver due to folliculitis barbae, where I could just grow out my beard a little so I didn't get ingrown hairs, the process at the time required me to renew it every year. The condition never changed. It wasn't like it was going to just go away. It's indefinite. So,
oh, you mean your genetics aren't going to change anytime soon, Ben?
So every time I go back to the doctor, they would just sign the paper again. Well, one year I got a new doctor that was very new to the military, but kind of had an affinity more for the military side of things. And he looked at my waiver and he said, I don't believe in this and I don't think you need it and I'm not going to sign it.
And if he's the medical professional, unfortunately, you are subject to his opinion.
Right. And I looked at him and I had this moment, I think, of social intelligence where I realized that it was utterly and completely fruitless to argue with him. And if I did, it could potentially have far-reaching negative repercussions.
Well, that guy basically put himself on top of a hill and dared you to try to knock him down.
Yeah, of course. Yes, he did. And not only that, he expressed the same opinion I've heard lots of people express that that don't have a medical background, don't have medical training, and are basically second guessing the opinion of a trained medical professional. He was the 1 out of 10 doctors that disagreed with the other 9.
Right, and there is, anyway, like to drive us back to where we started this, apparently while you were listening back, you had some kind of epiphany with the point that I was trying to make of that.
Yeah, because I was resisting you because I was talking about a different point, and you were making this coherent point about how, and I think it's a good one, I feel like it's a lesson I can learn, that I don't need to second guess accommodations that are given to people that need them.
Okay, that's a good lesson to learn.
Yeah. That was it. That got me thinking of things that I see where this happens. The internet allows us to see videos of people being jerks all the time. And one you see a lot is one I've seen is self-righteous people talking to someone that's upright and walking. They'll come up to them parking in a handicap spot at a store and be like, you don't deserve to park here.
You have absolutely no context or understanding. If he's got the sticker in his car, then yeah, he gets to park there. Oh, this is where I'm coming from. Is remove all emotional content, remove all judgment from what your assumptions are about a person. Like when somebody is presented to you, you just have to observe the facts and don't judge the facts. It's like, these are the facts of this person. They are walking upright. They are this tall. They're driving that kind of car. They parked in a handicapped spot. Now, if you want to investigate, should they be parking in a handicapped spot? Really? Unless you are handicapped and that affected your day, why would you even go waste any amount of time trying to pursue that social justice?
That is it, Josh. I think if it was, there was someone that needed it as much or more that wasn't able to use it because somebody did, and I think this is part. Your thing about cognitive bias is part of it. The other part I think is about limited resources. We can't accommodate everyone to the full extent that everyone wants to be accommodated because of limitations. What if the whole parking lot was handicap spots?
Oh, no. We need, I've already figured this out. Everybody needs a placard that hangs from their window like a handicap sticker, but they're not all handicap stickers. We just all need stickers, and they're ranked from 1 to 1,000. And then you can only park in parking spots with numbers higher than the number you have.
That'd be fine if cars were autonomous and you get to the closest spot and you have a lower number than someone, and you just push a button on your dash and it moves their car down 1.
All right, so I'm going to present a little bit of my personal bias when it comes to parking right now. If you drive past an open spot to try to find one that's closer, you're lazy and you're wasting everyone's time. Just park and walk.
Yeah, and that's what I do. And I'm grateful that I can.
Just get that little nudge in there.
All right, I want to tell you one story about and then we'll close the accommodations thing. And thank you, Nicole, for bringing that up. I appreciate that. So on military installations, they typically have what's called the BX and the commissary, the base exchange and the grocery store. It's like a super Walmart, but they're separated because they're from different lines of accounting in the federal government. So you can't go between the two. And usually it's one big parking lot and one big building, but you have to. So my wife and my kids and I came all together, and she had some shopping she needed to do in the department store. I had some shopping I needed to do in the grocery store. And she said, let's divide and conquer. Park in the middle. You can bring the groceries out, and whoever gets done first will go find the other one. I'm like, fine. So I'm driving down the line of parking, and she's just because I can't remember the exact number, I'm going to make it as high as possible. She was 8 months pregnant. And
pregnant.
in front of some buildings, not all, but some, and this is kind of voluntary on the part of the retailer, there was a designated parking spot for expectant mothers. And she said,
"Oh, and you parked." I already know the whole. I can intuit the whole rest of the story.
So
go ahead.
She said, "Park there," and I was like, I'm more worried about my feelings than the fact that she's 8 months pregnant." I'm like, okay. So I park in the parking spot, and I'm thinking she's going to run into the department store for 10 minutes and come find me in the grocery store where I've got 30 minutes worth of shopping to do. So I go in and do 30. You're seeing all the way to the end. I go in and do 30 minutes worth of shopping. And if you know anything about shopping in a commissary and a military installation, there's this old tradition where they don't hire baggers for the employees of the grocery store don't bag your groceries for you. There are I don't know what to call them, volunteers, but they're not. They're like employees, but they only get paid on tips.
Yeah, they're not paid. They're not, which makes them not employees.
So
they work there. They have a vest, and you have to tip them.
Yeah. So they come up and they bag your groceries for you, and then they go with you out to the car. They don't ask you if you want them to go with you out to the car. They come with you out to the car because they put them all in a special cart that they got to take back and stuff like that. So I had kind of forgotten that I was supposed to be waiting for my wife to come, and they helped me bag up my groceries and put them in the cart, and we started walking out to the car, and then it dawns on me where my car is.
Oh no, I'm in the expectant mothers. I'm going to be judged so badly by everyone that sees me. I'm going to get so many dirty looks.
No, not just that. I'm with the bagger.
So you're having social anxiety for judgment of people that don't know your scenario.
Well, yeah, I'm going to walk over to my car that's right up in front of this store all by myself, obviously physically fit and very able, and I'm in the only expectant mother spot in the parking lot.
That's hilarious. So did the bagger immediately throw your groceries on the ground and stomp away in disgust?
You're using a sarcastic example. This is a tool you use frequently to point out that what's the cost of this social anxiety in this situation? It's nothing.
And I'm doing it on purpose because I remember I decided consciously at a very young age, you know what? Caring about what other people think is exhausting, and I'm just not going to do it anymore.
But you also wouldn't deliberately park in a pregnant spot.
I wouldn't unless my wife was pregnant and with me, and then it doesn't matter. After that point, it doesn't matter. It's like my wife is pregnant and with me. I'm parking in this spot to prevent her from having to walk too far. Everything else, all other considerations are moot.
Okay, I can't remember which child that was. I'll assume it's my youngest, just to give a number. That was 14 years ago. I'd say in those 14 years, I've gotten more at peace about that kind of thing. I think if I had to do that same thing again today, I wouldn't even get the anxiety. I would just think in my head, I parked there for a reason. That person doesn't need to know. It probably won't even come up.
Then there's a reason that it seems like old men just do not give any Fs to anyone about anything. It's because they don't. They just don't have the time or energy to care about it.
But I don't think it's in a rude way. It's just in about a social understanding and contextualization. You just get it.
Nah, it's a threshold thing. It's I only have so much energy to care about things throughout the day, and you do no longer meet my threshold.
It's time for a Bad It segment. I think you've got one first.
I do. I don't know how long the segment will be, but I thought this was very interesting. I wanted to bring it up. So, this is the first week of January 2023. Happy New Year, Ben.
Thank you.
One of the changes that they made at my work recently is we've decided to go fully virtual. Just 100%. We're not going to have an office in a few months. I won't have a desk anymore.
Wow.
And so I'm working 5 days a week from home. I'm going to go into a physical location once a month to touch base with my boss, but that's it.
That's a big transformation. So anytime a customer needs to sign something or hand you something, you do it all digitally?
All digitally. Well, we will still have a small physical footprint with our client support person that can do that kind of stuff. I can
physical
call them,
records where they're required.
Yeah, physical records getting the mail, sending stuff in the mail. Somebody wants to come in and actually physically pick stuff up. We've decided we're going to charge those people extra to discourage them from doing the physical stuff. It's a digital age, man.
Yeah.
Like, why bother? It's safer. Like, it's
I
much
feel
better.
like you were instrumental in this decision.
I hope so. Maybe.
Huh.
I'm a huge fan. It's been great working from home since COVID started. Thank you, COVID. That's the one silver lining that came out of COVID is normalizing telework.
Okay, so I get there's, to the bottom line of a business, if you can stop leasing expensive commercial real estate, that's just a straight off the top reduction in your overhead. But are you guys more productive? Do you get more done in a workday?
So, and this is interesting. All the articles and everything that I read is that, of course, it's person dependent. But on average, across the board, firms and workplaces that go virtual show higher productivity than firms that don't. But it's
but I'm asking a specific question. You know the statistics for your organization.
I personally am more productive. Actually, I say more productive, but it's not. I'm as productive everywhere because I have a good work ethic. Like I know how much I need to get done. And I know how much time I have, and so I get it all done in the time that I have.
Okay.
My workload is a gasp, and it will expand to fill the
but
volume that
you're
I'm constrained.
subtracting what would you say your commute was? 45 minutes or something like that?
My commute was roughly 40 minutes one way.
Yes, so you're subtracting that time from your day.
Exactly, and that's time that I'm getting back.
Yeah.
That's I don't have to spend as much money on my fancy clothes. I wear pajama pants every day. Ben, it's been wonderful. But anyway, this is all from the. What's interesting is you brought up the business perspective. From the business perspective, it can be cheaper, and if the productivity is there and you have the right processes, blah, 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 it can be better.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it from the personal perspective. Like you were just brought up, like I don't have a commute anymore. My expenses are going down. I actually am more flexible to do stuff with my kids throughout the day, like if they happen to be home. But one of the things that I found over the last couple of months that I was really interested in was this thing called digital nomad visas. Have you heard of that?
No.
This is an awesome new thing that is happening in the world. And so there are countries.
Okay, so the word visa, is it used in a symbolic respect, or is it we're talking about like actual legal visas?
There are countries that are offering legal visas to people that have full-time teleworking jobs. They say, hey, if you have a teleworking job that you can work in your country of residence, but you want to come live in our country and spend all your money in our country, feel free. And they're digital that's what it's called, is a digital nomad
Okay, that's
visa.
interesting because I remember when we lived in Italy, Italy had some really strict laws about foreign nationals coming to their country and then taking up local jobs. So there was only like 3 jobs that the spouses of the military members could get, and they were all on the base, and they fought over those jobs. Otherwise, people who worked before they came to Italy couldn't work at all. So this...
Yeah, so at the height of my my Trump terror, I did a little bit of research on what it takes to emigrate to a different country. And one of the things you have to have is a visa. And like a visa is like a permission slip from the country. Yes, you can come move here. You can't just fly to another country and buy a house. That's not a thing. You have to have government approval for all this stuff, right? And
that's what a visa is.
And most of the time you'd get your visa through your employer. You have to have a firm that is in another country willing to put its neck out for somebody that's not a citizen to come work in their country. They've got to jump through extra hoops just as much as you do, filling out paperwork and assuring the government, yes, we're giving them a real job. Yes, it will be enough to be able to sustain their existence. They won't be a drain on society.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to do.
It's not fun, and that's why people typically don't hire foreign nationals, like legally.
Right, and they're not going to let you just come into the country with unemployed, hoping that you'll get a job and be a problem on their social services.
That's probably how it was back in like the 1860s, but no longer. But now we have digital nomad visas, and there is a surprising number of countries that are authorizing these and creating these.
Of course. It's just like an instant shot in the arm to their tourism budget.
So I'm going to go down.
You're bringing in foreign funds.
As of November 2022, there are 49 countries that either have digital nomad visas or have legislation pending to authorize digital nomad visas. I'm going to hit some of the high points. Iceland, Germany, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Malta, Greece, Romania, Cyprus, Latvia, Albania, Barbados, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, Dominica, the Bahamas, St. Lucia, Costa Rica, Panama, Ecuador, Brazil, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Malaysia, Serbia, Montenegro, Indonesia, Italy, Colombia, South Africa, all of these countries.
Is the United Kingdom on there?
The United Kingdom is not on this list.
Huh. Now, okay, I got a quiz for you. You've mentioned in your childhood having watched the movie The Sword and the Stone, Disney's The Sword and the Stone.
Yes.
Do you remember where Merlin went when he wanted to relax?
Yes. Oh, he went to, it started with a B. I think it was Barbados.
Nope.
Is it the Bahamas? Bermuda. Ah.
That was on the list.
It was on the list.
So Merlin could work in England, but remotely, but live in Bermuda.
There you go. So this is, I'm bringing this up
digital
because
nomad visa.
This just opened up like a whole realm of possibility. Like I asked my wife when I stumbled across this thing and started researching. I'm like, so hey, what are the odds you can get your organization to authorize 100% telework instead of 80% telework?
Which specific one did you say? Did one of those appeal to you?
I'm not gonna lie. Like I think Norway would be awesome. I'd put Viking crap on all my walls. I would wear big giant furs on my shoulders all day. I'd carry a shield around for no reason. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I wouldn't mind going back to Italy.
And that's the thing. Like we talked about this when COVID happened and people were learning and working from home. Like you prophesized like a mass exodus from the big cities back out into suburbia.
No more big cities.
This is just another kind of tangent of that same mentality. It's like, I have a job. It's digital. Why does it matter where I'm physically located?
Nice. All right, it's time for Bad Parenting, Josh.
Man, I feel like I'm just going to talk this whole time. Okay, so this will probably be short. This is the first time this has ever happened to me, Ben. I don't know what it is. Like, my kids are just at the certain age, and then we had the COVID shutdown for the 2 years. But I was coming home from picking up my kids at school. It was 2 days ago. It was on Thursday, okay? And I was taking my son to football practice, so we were crunched for time. And so my wife was here teleworking, and I was going to drop my daughter off at home so she could go get her homework started. And then I was going to take my son to football practice. And as I'm coming down our street, there's a bunch of little kids playing in the street, which generally I frown on. Like, the street is for cars. Don't be in the street. But it's fine. They all scattered like cockroaches in different directions. And I drove up to our house, and I pulled over, and I got Jane out of the car, started getting her stuff. And then all the little kids started yelling her name. Apparently, she knows all these little children from her school time. They're like her classmates or after-school friends or whatever. They're like, oh, can you come out and play? And then she just like turned to me with like these big eyes, like, what, can I play? I'm like, no, I'm not going to be here to supervise. I have no idea who these children are. Go inside and get your homework done. Your mother will take over in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
That's not.
That was Josh's knee-jerk reaction in the context of 2022. Did you have second thoughts on that later? Did you evaluate your own childhood?
That was the knee-jerk of, right now I have to get in a car and drive away. I don't have time to like mold you into this person that is capable of doing this on your own. Okay. So, but then this is the thing that happened the next day. The next day, I was at home working, and it was in the afternoon, but my kids were still at aftercare, and they were going to go straight to their grandparents' house anyway. But all those details doesn't matter. What matters is I was here, my kids weren't, and the doorbell rang. I'm like, nobody rings my doorbell. What is this? And I go to the door and I open it, and it's this little boy, and he goes, "Can Jane come out and play?"
Aw, how nice.
That's never happened to me before, Ben. And
First time
that happened to me. And she wasn't there. And I didn't know how to respond to a tiny child that isn't mine. And tell it, like,
did you puff up your chest and rise up to your full height of 6'4" and be like, "No, tiny human"?
Well, no. I just growled at him until he ran away. No, I didn't actually do that. No, I in the spectrum of ways I can tell somebody no, I did it as soft as I could. I explained, I apologized. Oh, she's not here. She's not going to be here for a few hours.
Aw, I bet you were so nice. Boy.
Get off of my porch.
I bet he ran away and said, like, Santa told me that Jane's not there.
All right, in reality, he turned around. He's like, okay. And he turned around and he walked off my porch. In my mind, he went, well, all right. And like kicked the dirt and like drug both his feet off of my porch 1 foot at a time. And so that's the point. Like the initial knee-jerk, get in the house, I don't want to deal with these other little children. That was in my head and gone. That little kid asking if she'd come out and play, like, crap. They know where we live. And, like, this is going to be a thing.
The doorbell's going to start ringing.
The doorbell's going to ring. Little kids are going to ask my kids to go out and play. And my kids have never gone out and played in the front yard unsupervised before. And so, like, that sounds really
You can
bad.
do it, Josh. I believe in you.
It happened today, Ben. It happened today.
She went outside and played with the neighborhood kids?
The doorbell rang, and it was 3 of the little neighborhood kids like, can Jane come out and play? And I was like, huh. She was still in her dance clothes. I said, go get changed. And I said, yes, she'll be out in a few minutes. And then I shut the door. But then the next thing I did is, like, because I had been thinking about this, thankfully, she was coming back, and I said, okay, I have 4 rules for you that you must obey if you want to play outside by yourself. She goes, and she wanted to play with her friends, so she was very serious for once. This 8-year-old little girl looked me in the eyes with all the seriousness that an 8-year-old can summon. Okay, all right, 1, you don't cross the street. Like, just stay out of the street. Street is for cars, not for you. Stay out of the street. Okay. Like, laterally, you can't go around any corners. I need to be able to walk out of the building and be able to see you by turning my head. And she goes, okay. All right, 3rd rule, do not go into anybody's house. Because I guarantee those kids invited her into their houses. And I'm like, do not go into other people's houses. Just don't do it. I don't want to spend my afternoon burning down the neighborhood looking for you.
Josh.
And then the 4th rule, this is the most important one for little kids. The 4th rule, and I told her, this is the most important one. I don't care what their rules are. I don't care what their parents let them do. These are your rules, and you must obey them. And she said, okay. And she went outside and she played with the neighborhood kids like a rapscallion for 3 or 4 hours.
This feels like a milestone for settling down.
It feels like
you've reached a point of you've settled down so much that now your kids go out front and play with the neighborhood kids.
Well, and this is different. This should have come, and I'm acknowledging this should have come earlier than it did. But there was 2 years where we didn't leave the house because of COVID pandemic.
Yes, that too. I mean, that's also a contrast. So there's the contrast of you used to be nomads that traveled all over the place and moved all the time, and they didn't feel like they belonged anywhere, although your kids have been there their whole lives.
You're talking about yourself. You're projecting now, Ben.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, I'm remembering my childhood.
Yes, that's the point I want to make, Josh. Yeah. I walked outside the first time I got to a new neighborhood and I broke all 4 of those rules in the first 60 seconds. I'm like, all right, we're going to go around the corner. We're going to go into someone's house. And we're
Ben, I remember putting tens of miles on my bike in a day in the middle of summer in Arizona. My parents had no idea. It's like, all right,
so
bye,
why
Mom.
are you so unwilling to allow your kids that same kind of leeway?
Well, and this is a new world that we're living in. And this is something...
Is it that much dangerous?
Okay,
is it that much worse?
Yes, it is. In a couple of important ways, yes, it is. It is a different world that we live in now, and maybe it's not different. Maybe we're just more aware of the things that were already
when you
happening.
and I were kids, there was no sex offender registry to see how many there were on the block. Now you can know they're there, but they were there before.
That doesn't make it okay, Ben. like saying like, oh well, you know. There was probably sex offenders when I was a kid, but none of them got to me, so it'll never happen to my kids. That's just hopefully naive, willfully blind. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to save my kids from like the worst of humanity that exists out there, which is difficult to do, and I understand that. You know what? I had the same conversation with somebody about hitchhikers the other day, and somebody brought up an excellent point. Like, have you ever picked up a hitchhiker? No, get out of town. You're crazy. But my boss said, oh yeah, my parents used to pick up hitchhikers all the time. And then someone else, the person that brought up the point originally said, I just read this interesting book about hitchhiking and how it was more normal for normal people to hitchhike in like the early and mid 1900s versus now where only... I'm not going to say bad people, but like the bell curve of people that hitchhike has skewed way to the bottom of that distribution.
All right, I want to take the same metaphor you made and do something ridiculous that you won't approve of.
Excellent.
So when we were kids, our parents used to allow us to play outside, and it was normal, and everyone played outside. But now only crazy people play outside.
It's all right. Arizona in the summertime, only crazy people leave their house at all. Period. So that doesn't really apply here. But I'm aware that my children, as they get older, are going to start, like the radius of where they go is going to expand, and it has to.
Right.
And this was one way where I felt like this was right on the edge of my comfort zone. I'm not going to lie, Ben, of like, I'm going to let you, my psychotic Tasmanian devil of a little girl child, out of my sight for several hours. And I need to be able to trust you to not be killed or to commit murder in that time frame. Can I do that?
Yeah. This is you saying this, and I'm sure our listeners are probably going through the same, the ones that are parents. You're giving me flashbacks of all these little moments that we had that aren't the same as yours, but are qualitatively the same. Moments where we stepped up to some precipice that we'd never gone off of before as parents, and we looked at each other and said, are we ready to do this? And we either weren't or we gave it a shot. And, we haven't ruined it so far.
No, that's the thing, is you just do the best you can. And
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about the specifics, but like you mentioned, every parent is going to have different flashpoints like this. This is what one of those was. This was one of those moments where time came to a screeching halt and my brain kicked up to 95% utilization as I analyzed everything that could go, like pros and cons. And like me, I had to tip the scales. I had to put my finger on the scale of, yes, let her do this, because I need to show her that I trust her.
So you had to use your executive functions to override your automatic weighted average that was against this.
Yes, because specifically I need to show trust and I need to be able to trust. And you can't trust someone if you don't show them trust. Like, I don't know. You have to let out the rope as you... I have no metaphor for this.
I think we're going to talk about this exact thing later on when we get to artificial intelligence. So, teaser, that's coming up. There's one other thing related to bad parenting I want to talk about, Josh, and that was I had something surprise happen at work this week that I was not expecting at all. So, we've talked in this podcast in the past about how the military can sometimes be a little bit of a social petri dish for the nation, because it's something that like our executives and legislatures have direct control over, and they could do something to the military that they want to happen in the rest of society. And you might know, and I'm sure your wife's probably brought up to you before, that the U.S. lags behind many other countries when it comes to how liberally we allow family leave.
Yes, extremely. Like there are so many forms of paid leave that just don't exist here.
Right, and that are well known and freely available elsewhere in the developed world. Well, this week the U.S. took a big step forward in that respect. I don't remember. Was Carter born before you got out of the Air Force?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Did you take any paternal leave at the time?
Dude, I couldn't take my normal leave during that time.
So did you take, I'm sure you were there for the birth and stuff. How much leave did you actually take?
I think I got 1 full week off.
Okay. You're talking about two things, and I want to constrain the discussion just to what the policy is, not what the culture is. Because the culture is going to have to follow behind. But the policy changed this week. So the Secretary of Defense released a directive memorandum telling all of the components in the Department of Defense that new parents now are entitled to 12 weeks of leave, and the non-birth parent is also entitled to 12 weeks of parental leave.
Wow.
And it used language like it said commanders are directed to balance their mission to allow parents to be with their children during this important time.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Now I have a very cynical explanation for that, but I'll let you finish your hypothesis.
I'm just saying, regardless of how much cynicism there is behind it, the mechanical change has taken place. As I mentioned in the last episode, I have a member of my unit that's currently at home with his brand new twins, and we've now extended his leave out to the 1st of April, and because
that's outstanding. Good for him.
The Secretary of Defense said he's entitled to do that.
Okay. Here's the... all right. So you explained the memorandum came down. It was a directive memorandum because it has to be.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
That's something you
Culture
have to shove
will
down.
Eat this strategy for breakfast.
Oh, yeah. You've got to shove this down their throat. Like, this is the new reality. Get used to it right now.
Right.
But here's the other part, Ben. Here's the unspoken part that I can promise you. On the backside, like the memorandum comes out, and this is the poster that we put in front of everybody that let the common man go, yeah, we're making changes in the right direction. Thumbs up. And then in the meeting that all the squadron commanders have with the wing commander, like, all right, here's the skinny. Because anytime anybody has a baby, they're out for 12 weeks. You need to adjust your manpower requirements. Like, so now, like, obviously, we're all going to need more people, which means we're all going to need a larger budget. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, but I think it will just kind of come out in the aggregate. Like, this will actually have... changes like this aren't free. You can't pay a group of people to do something and say, now you're going to be gone for 3 months instead of 2 weeks, and it's not going to have any cost. It will have a cost.
I know that, and I'm thinking about this from the bureaucratic standpoint of the Secretary of Defense. This is a masterstroke because, one, he is giving something to people that everybody wants.
Yeah,
everybody will agree that they want it. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle that you're on. Everybody agrees this is a good thing. And
it's going to show in the readiness system.
And he gets to go in front of Congress and say, like, we did this for our troops, and now if you think this is a good thing, you either need to give me more money or you need to force me to take it away from them.
Okay, that was very cynical and also probably very accurate. I'm not. I can't argue with that.
I mean, but a win's a win, right? So it doesn't matter if the cynical intent produces good fruit. Like, I don't know. Like, if the tree is poison, is the apple not tasty?
Well, the opposite could be that, like, the defense budget doesn't increase because of this, or they don't build one less bomber or whatever, and they actually cut manpower because of it.
Oh, no. You'll have to become slightly more efficient.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's the best way to look at it. We can all become slightly more efficient to cover for this important thing that we should have been doing already and weren't.
I don't know how I can layer any more sarcasm into the statement that I'm about to say, but I don't know, Ben. The military is just so hyper lean and efficient already. I'm not sure where you can scrape up the savings.
I get that. I love that. It's very sarcastic, Josh. I've been reading some histories lately, and we're not very good at understanding that in the very short, brief stint of our timeline. If you go back to the Reagan administration at the height of the Cold War, when Strategic Air Command, you couldn't walk across the base without stepping on an airman that was trimming the grass with a pair of scissors.
You can't. I know that because that's how that's how the USSR fell. Is we just, like, somebody came in office and said, you know what? Instead of trying to negotiate, we're just going to triple our military spending and see how long Russia can keep up.
Spoiler alert, they couldn't.
Yeah, their entire economy collapsed because they were pouring every spare cent that they had or ruble rather, into their freaking military complex to try to compete with our spending, and they couldn't.
Yeah. All right. Well done. Josh, I want to take a big step forward for the Bad at Magic podcast here on episode 89, and we're going to do a new segment that we're going to call Bad at Rhetoric. But I want to contextualize this.
Whoa. New things change. Ben, come on now.
It's a new year, Josh. Welcome to 2023. So,
new year, new us.
Are you familiar with the 7 liberal arts of classical antiquity?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so just like you were dividing up the New Testament into groups, the liberal arts are divided into groups. There's a group of 4 and a group of 3. The group of 4 is called the quadrivium. It's the upper division of medieval education in the liberal arts, and it's arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And to put that in common terms, numbers as abstractions, numbers in space, numbers in time, and numbers in space and time. So it's all.
So we're talking math with different applications.
Math. The quadrivium's about math with different applications. And then there's the trivium. The trivium, which has the same root word as trivia, is where 3 roads meet in ancient Greek, and it is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar,
I understand, is just the sheer mechanical processes of words putting together.
Right, the mechanics of language. Logic is the mechanics of thought. And
well, it should be, but it's not.
And then
commonly.
Rhetoric is the application of language to be persuasive, whether in writing or in speech. So
this is the part that I'm always missing. I'm pretty decent at grammar and very good at logic, but I cannot communicate that to other people, and it always just ends up being, well, I'm right, and if you don't understand that, well, then you're dumb. So just listen to what I'm telling you.
So that is what we're going to undertake here. You didn't realize it, but we had already undertaken 2 of the 3 pillars of the trivium here on the Bad at Magic podcast in Bad at English and Bad at Logic.
We're so highbrow without even trying.
I know.
Tell your friends, listeners, this is the podcast to be.
One of our listeners had said, hey, you guys should do a segment on rhetoric. So when I actually looked it up, I realized it was the 3rd pillar of the trivium of the liberal arts of classical antiquity. So we are now going to add to our study of grammar and our study of logic a study of rhetoric.
Okay, tangent. Do you live in some universe that has more hours in the day than I'm aware of? Because, like, a listener randomly mentioned something to me, so I immediately went to my public library and sat for several hours with different books and learned about ancient Greek educational methods. Like, seriously, who are you and where do you get this time?
Well, so I didn't realize there was all these connections until my daughter-in-law told me this, and I looked it up, and I was like, this is perfect. This is just what we needed. So from ancient Greece until today has been this study of how to use language in application, in writing, and in speech in order to be persuasive. And it's called rhetoric. So we're going to use, as our, kind of like we've used the critical thinking cards, we're going to use this site by my alma mater, Brigham Young University. It's called rhetoric.byu.edu. And it's just a dictionary of terms of rhetoric. We'll pick one each week. We'll discuss it in context. This site was provided by the professor, Dr. Gideon Burton. It's intended to help beginners make sense of rhetoric. And each figure has a function, a name, an order, and we'll look at it, contextualize it, give some examples. It'll be just like our other segment. So, for instance...
does this mean we're going to have to do bad at grammar when we run out of these?
No, we've already been doing bad at grammar. That's bad at English.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
This will be our first bad at rhetoric, and the term is euphemismus, which is from the Greek root meaning words of good omen, or to speak fair, which is substituting a more favorable for a pejorative or socially delicate term. Euphemismus, or a euphemism.
Everybody listening to this podcast that's over the age of 17 knows what a euphemism is because you use them frequently.
Yeah. So I thought in my mind, like, what's something we use euphemisms for? And probably more than anything else is a place that you go that you do human elimination functions.
Nope. False. Incorrect, sir.
Okay, what?
There is... Well, I would tell you, but I have to go spend a little alone time with the missus.
I need to go see a man about the dog.
Nicole and I are going to go have a date night.
All right. I'm going to go to the bathroom.
It's like, well, I got to spend a little quality time with my better half.
I'm going to go to the ladies.
Well, you're just saying the name of the room. Like, that's not a euphemism. That's just a factual statement. It
absolutely
of where you're going.
Is a euphemism. There's no bathtub in a public restroom, and you don't rest in there.
Ugh. You don't drive on a parkway either, Ben, or you don't park on a parkway. We're not.
These are deliberately euphemisms. We are culturally sensitive about talking about one of the most basic functions of organisms existing.
I like the sex ones better.
The elimination of waste. Okay, so last week we talked, and I have to make a correction. I said that the British dry brown biscuits are called digestibles. They're actually digestives. But just
even worse, Brandon.
Just like how we talk about how full fat milk we call whole milk because it sounds nicer, we call it the bathroom instead of the because that's what we're actually doing in there.
We're performing the other half of the necessary function of providing fuel to the machine.
So our term for bad at rhetoric is euphemismus, which means substituting a more favorable for a pejorative or socially delicate term.
I still like mine better. All right, Ben, we are going to depart from the norm. And this is totally crazy. We are in uncharted territory here. Listeners, buckle up because I'm taking the helm. This is something that I've wanted to talk about, that I had to clue Ben in onto. And then you did the thing that I do to my wife, and I know now why it drives her so crazy. Is because I texted you multiple times about ChatGPT and sending you video clips and like articles like, look at this. This is something that we need to address. And then like 2 weeks later, you came back like, did you see this thing about ChatGPT? We need to talk about this. And I felt like
I've been trying to tell you about this all along.
I've been trying to. Yeah.
Okay, I want you to try to recontextualize this in your mind, Josh. Don't think that we're being we're like, oh, I thought of this brilliant thing. Just think that you had the desired effect.
I won.
Yeah,
that's the end.
That's it. Victory.
We're doing the thing that I said we needed to do. I have accomplished the task. Okay, so I have broken this section because I'm a much more logical person and I am much worse at flow than you are as far as transitions and things for. So if I'm going to drive,
that's all right. We'll fix it in post-production.
Go fix what in post? No. I've got a plan here.
Okay.
And I've quantified
Listeners,
it.
we're talking about artificial intelligence.
I didn't say it, did I? We are talking about artificial intelligence. God, I'm screwing this up already. All right, here are the things. It's like I have 3 bullets that I want to hit, and they are not equally weighted, okay?
Okay.
The first bullet is I want to have a specific discussion about ChatGPT, the ramifications, thoughts, reactions, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Then I want to have another general conversation about artificial intelligence, its role, what we think, deep down thought. Like let's get heavy with it. That's like really highbrow that. And then the last little bit, I do want to take some time and have some lighthearted fun. And let's do best and worst case scenarios. Like let's project far future. What does the human race look like with AI?
Okay, that almost sounds like one of our Patreon only episodes.
It might turn into that, or maybe it'll turn into a longer one. I don't know.
Okay.
But the first conversation that I want to have with you is the initial thoughts and reactions to ChatGPT. Ben, did you create a ChatGPT username and go talk to it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What do you think?
Okay, so I first just had to figure out, like, what is this thing? Because I wanted to know. All right, let me go back to my childhood. When I had my first computer, when you've got like an Apple II back in the 80s, there would usually be like a package of disks with it, and almost all of them included some version of this utility that was probably only like 100 lines of code that would just be some thing where the computer pretended like it was talking to you, and it was just a text parser that recognized a few common things that you could type. You would type something to it, and it would talk back to you.
Text to speech.
Yes, and sometimes it would actually say it in speech, but it wasn't just like you tell it what to say. It would be like you ask it a question and it would give you an answer. And
No, I didn't have that. I just had I type a word. And
No. I'm talking about actual, like it was supposed to give the illusion of interacting with your computer.
Wow. Okay.
And it was kind of cool at first because computers were new and this was an interesting thing, and it was a little bit gimmicky. Because after a second, you'd realize that you weren't interacting with a computer; you were interacting with a list.
Right. I actually made something like that. I remember being in middle school and doing the text editor code, like Go210. Like I'd have it ask questions, and you have to type out responses, and then it would check your responses, and then give you something else.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of hours trying to think of what people would type into the thing so I can make an appropriate response.
Yes, so that had been done. That was my first experience. So when I go to interact with something like this, my mind goes back to that. And that's the first thing I'm kind of looking for. Is this just a dictionary that parses what I have to say and spits back out a pre-programmed response?
And now, to burst your bubble and your illusion on that, no, ChatGPT is fundamentally and astronomically different from that thing where it would recognize certain inputs and then it had a set list of canned responses.
Yes.
That is not this.
Right. So I started looking into it and I found out that this is very much an autonomous artificial intelligence that's using contextual information from society. It's keeping track of the history of me as an individual interacting with it, and it's doing all of these things. So I went into it trying to, I don't know, give it the Turing test. Are you familiar with the Turing test?
Oh, who are you talking to? Yes. Alan Turing classically was the person who conceptualized the general computer, came up with the test of artificial intelligence. And that is, if you say things or you give prompts and the responses come back and you can't distinguish the responses if it's from a computer or if it's from a person, then that is artificial intelligence.
Yes. And he was one of the first to propose that in what has become almost its own discipline, and that is philosophy of artificial intelligence. Like, how do you know if something is an artificial intelligence or not? And he proposed, like you said, that if it seems like a human, then it's artificial intelligence.
Tangent. I read a biography about Alan Turing, specifically about his years in working the Enigma decoding. Fascinating crap this guy had to come up with back in the day for computers. Like, because computers back then were just like complex electrical circuits. And it was great. They had a number that was going to travel physically from one part of the machine to the other. And it was going to take 2 paths. One path that was going to be processed, another path that just had to be remembered so they could compare the 2 outputs at the other end, okay? So there was transformations happening on one but not on the other. And they had to physically slow the transfer of the information as it split on these paths so that they traveled at the same time so it would show up at the endpoint to be compared at the same time, okay?
Yeah.
And they discovered that, okay, if we convert the electrical signal to a wave, put it into a pipe that is this diameter, and fill that pipe with gin, it gives us the exact delay that we need to get this variable over here.
That sounds like alchemy.
Yeah, and it was. It was black magic with electricity, and it was so cool.
Okay. Yeah. So that was my attitude going into this thing. So I sat down and I'm like, all right, what is it that if I have an actual artificial intelligence here that I'm chatting with that's, pumping away clock cycles on some Amazon Web Services server farm and, is actually going to run an algorithm and machine learning and artificial intelligence. And what kind of problem do I want to give this? What do I want to ask it?
Right. And so what did you ask it?
Well, I have a feeling, and I wonder if other people have this feeling, and as I've listened to other people talk about this, they have the same feeling. It's like, well, there's this miraculous new technology that can do everything, and you sit down and you're like, you can't think of anything to ask it. Like, why did the chicken cross the road? So
that's actually a great question to ask ChatGPT. I want to see what it says.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
Yes. What does an artificial intelligence think a chicken crossing the road is for? Why did the chicken cross the road? ChatGPT. I'm not going to say its name, but and it gives me a very artificial intelligence lame answer. The answer to this question is a popular joke that has been told for many years. The punchline to the joke is to get to the other side. It is meant to be a humorous way of pointing out that the reason given for the chicken crossing the road is often nonsensical or unrelated to the actual reason. Thanks, AI. Nothing kills a joke like explaining it.
Okay, have you ever played the game Categories?
I have, yes.
Okay, in the game Categories, you do it. They give you these blank sheets of paper where you roll a letter and you have a clue sheet, and then you roll another letter and use the same clue sheet, and then roll a third letter and use the same clue sheet. And at the top of each column, there's a little graphic. And at the first one, it shows a person with like an idea bursting out of their head. And then on the second column, it shows like 5 or 10 ideas bursting out of their head. And then on the last column, it's so many you can't even count them all. And I feel like I'm still on the first column with this understanding what to do with artificial intelligence. Like, I can only think of a few rudimentary things, but there's got to be something good we can do with this.
Okay, so what a lot of people have been doing with this, and what a lot of people... let me take a step back first. First of all, people, when it first came out, were hailing this as the thing that was going to destroy like all the jobs. Like, all the jobs are done.
Yeah,
ChatGPT is going to do all
immediately have this slippery slope kind of reaction. Like, machines can now replace all humans.
And we will talk about that in our next segment. But like, the more people interacted with it, the more they realized, oh, okay, this isn't the job killer that we thought it was. And what ChatGPT is, at least from my experience and what I've done with it, it is by far and away the best common language interface that a computer has ever had. So think about all of the Marvel movies, all of the Iron Man movies, where he's just talking in plain language to his computer Jarvis.
Yeah.
And Jarvis is responding in appropriate ways and still understanding the intent of what Tony is saying in all those scenes.
All right.
That's what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is the best common language interface a computer has ever had.
All right. I have a couple others because I've seen people come up with some good applications for this. One person I listened to is a minister, and he was like, if you tell it, write me a 10-minute sermon focusing on Matthew chapter 5 and bringing out ideas about forgiveness, it will write you a stuff that will take you 5 minutes to read that most parishioners wouldn't be able to, just like you did on our last episode where you wrote your intro by having ChatGPT give it to you.
I told ChatGPT, I said, I host a podcast. I do a 3-minute introduction on the episode number. Can you write me a segment about the number 88? And it took, 15 seconds, and it spit out everything I needed to say verbatim. I didn't do it verbatim, but like it gave me a whole well-written, like, this is what you say.
So I listened to this Christian minister kind of analyze this. He really having almost like a gut check moment. Like, am I replaceable by a machine? Is it official now? Like, my job can be done by artificial intelligence. I'm worthless, and you just need someone up there to read it. And he said, no, there's something qualitatively different about one that's done by a human still.
Well, I mean, he says that, but he's biased to like humans versus.
Yeah,
like, he's
also an open-minded guy that's willing to think about this. He says, once I actually looked at the content of this speech, it was kind of hollow.
Well, I'll tell you this, Ben. like a lot of people were freaking out initially when like I said, when it first came out, about ChatGPT's ability to synthesize. Because somebody put in, I saw this on an article. Somebody typed in, "Can you write me a general lease agreement for the state of New York?" And it spit out like a 15-page document that contained all of the clauses necessary to be a legally binding contract in the state of New York.
Bam! Flashbacks to travel agents in the 90s. Like your whole job just went down the drains, paralegals.
Well, and that's what the article was about, is there was a union of lawyers and paralegals screaming at Congress, this needs to be outlawed right now. But then, all right, let's flash forward to today.
Well, which is an asinine thing to say. If your job can be replaced by a script, like, maybe you need to do another job.
All right, we're talking about lawyers. And as an accountant, lawyers recently told me directly that I'm not allowed to fill out simple forms anymore. All right, so in Arizona, if you want to form a business, you have to go to the Corporation Commission and file 3 pieces of paper, okay? And they're not rocket science. They're forms meant to be filled out by a layman.
Uh-huh.
But the bar of Arizona came to accountants and said, y'all are doing this and charging for it, but this is a legal service. Stop doing it or we will sue you into the ground.
Okay. Yeah, you're right, lawyers. I also want to point out that when I logged into this just now, I had to check the box that says, "I'm not a robot."
Right. Oh, I had to check the box, "I'm not a robot," and tell it what traffic lights looked like.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway,
ChatGPT can trick us into thinking it's a human, but it still can't tell what a traffic light is. Come on, get with the program, AI.
That's a whole other discussion. But another thing, teachers were freaking out because, like, you can go into ChatGPT and say, "Write me a 5-page essay about," and name a subject, and it will write you a 5-page essay. And then you can tell it, "Rewrite this at a lower grade level," and it will give you exactly the same thing, but at a lower grade level.
Okay.
Because it's a computer and it can do that.
So if you don't mind, I want to pause on this for a second because I want to weigh in on this subject. I have a master's degree in education.
Piece?
Yeah.
Throw that down.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Well, when you get a master's degree in education, you spend a lot of time talking about what is it we're actually trying to do here.
You know what, Ben? I'm actually well armed for this conversation, so bring it.
This is good because I am well on the side of, like, maybe we weren't trying to do the right thing. And this is the sign that it's time to change.
You see, thank you. There were teachers and there are so many educators freaking out of, like, how are we going to police children that can just go type one sentence and have an essay written on any topic in 15 seconds? And my response to that is, well, obviously you're not assessing their knowledge on that topic correctly.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, this is not a problem in education. This is a problem in assessing education.
And if teachers need to go back to the drawing board and reconsider, if it was just your knee-jerk reaction, say, go home and write an essay about this thing, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. You need to find out a better way to assess the knowledge that you're trying to impart to your students.
So I was thinking about that problem specifically, and I hearkened back to a movie scene that I remember from Star Trek. I think it was number 4, Journey Home, where they just got Spock back. And Spock is trying to relearn everything that he supposedly was supposed to know.
Oh, yeah, and he's sitting in that booth where it's just like spouting off a bunch of knowledge to him.
Yes, and it's a computer with a good common language interface asking him questions and assessing his approach to those questions, right? Because it's asking him both mathematical and philosophical questions, some that have definite correct answers and some that don't.
Yeah, it pauses on how are you feeling today.
Yeah. Well, because he didn't answer it, because he's Vulcan and he was half human. Like, all right, don't stop it. We're not talking about Star Trek. Scene. Spoilers for Star Trek, everyone. But then I started realizing, wait a minute, what if the thing that killed the educational assessment could be the new educational assessment? And I sat down and I asked ChatGPT, could you give a conversational assessment of my knowledge of any given subject? And ChatGPT explicitly said, while I could absolutely do that, and I could go through and ask you conversational questions and that you would respond to, I could not give you a grade at the end because I'm an artificial intelligence.
I feel like there's a whole opportunity for some academic researcher to look at all the questions that got asked during this trial period. Because this is going to end. This isn't just available in perpetuity on the internet. I saw an interview with some of the creators of this, and all of the processing time that they're leasing to run this is costing millions of dollars.
Yeah, but then weighed against the massive amount of data that they are collecting that they're going to feed back into this thing to help it learn.
So it's an investment.
It's absolutely
it's an opportunity for massive scale machine learning.
not only that, but then the data they're harvesting, like you said, you have an AI that can do anything. What do you ask it? They have the answer. They have a giant list of answers. Like this is like broken down by demographics because we had to give it some tiny bit of information about ourselves.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
So like the amount of data they're harvesting, they're going to recoup all of their money. Don't worry about that.
So there's one of the other hosts I listened to that was talking about this basically said anyone that's thinking this is going to now machines are going to replace all humans is asking the wrong question. I heard it said, and I can't attribute it to the right person, that instead of thinking of it now that we have access to infinite smart people, think of it as we have access to infinite dumb people. And then you'll start asking the right questions.
And this is the thing is because I went at it this morning and I asked it, hey, I'm doing a podcast. Anything interesting about the number 89? And it gave me a bulleted list of interesting facts about the number 89. And one of those was, the 89th president of the United States was George H.W. Bush. And I sat and looked at that for a second. I was like, we haven't had 89 presidents. And so then I asked it, how many presidents have we had? They said, we've had 45 presidents, and Joe Biden has been the latest one, or 46. I don't remember what the number was specifically. Then I go, earlier you said that George H.W. Bush was the 89th president. And I just put a question mark, and it said, that was a mistake that I made. Sorry.
What?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this is the thing. That right there, like when we're talking about like lawyers freaking out that it's going to replace lawyers, educators freaking out that it's going to replace essays.
Gosh, I love that you did that and noticed that and thought to ask that. That's fantastic.
Well, but
this is newsworthy.
Well, it got it wrong, which is fine.
But you noticed that it got it wrong and you asked it about it. Like it's an entity. You're like, hey, you got something wrong. What do you think about that?
Well, that's also just because I'm kind of a jerk. And like if somebody said, the 89th president was George H.W. Bush, even if they weren't part of my dining party, like at a table next to me at a restaurant, I'd be like, excuse me, we haven't had 89
I'm so glad you did that. I'm totally geeking out about it. That's freaking awesome.
But this is the point that I'm making from that, is that it's an artificial intelligence, but that doesn't make it infallible. And so everybody, that specific problem, that little mistake that it made, in my mind, erases the fear of it replacing any form of job where synthesis is required. This is not a tool to synthesize new things. That's not what it's for.
Yes, it's infinite dumb people. I saw a guy on TikTok, I think you sent it to me, actually, where he said, all I do is after our video chat is over, I take the auto transcript of it, I copy and paste it into ChatGPT and say, give this a summary of the main points and the action items, and it spits it out. And now my job that used to take me an hour is done in 60 seconds.
Yes. Having a freaking staff meeting with 15 people on a Skype call for an hour. It's like, hey, exactly that. Feed all these pages of text into the computer and like, hey, give me a bulleted list that I can send in an email. Like, that's awesome. Like what this is going to do, it's not going to create anything new. It will replace some jobs, but like, I see this as being the best automated like receptionist or scheduler that you have ever spoken to.
So I don't know if you've had this experience. I have, where there are companies, major companies, let's say like Verizon Corporation for wireless service, where when you call their phone tree or when you go on their automated customer support chat, it feeds you into an artificial intelligence powered one first before it connects you to a human. And it's kind of...
But that's not even artificial intelligence. It's like just a long phone tree that's trying to filter... All right, think of the pachinko
but I'd
machine.
say it's bordering more on AI. The ones like I've called on the phone, it's like, tell me why it is you're calling. And you tell it, and it's trying to get you in the right phone tree. But it also has a list of like easy filter out responses that it's trying to give. You're right, it's not really AI. But it could be improved by AI.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Instead of having to go through the multiple levels, because what you're talking about, everybody has experienced.
Yeah, and I've been frustrated with it.
It's a series of questions that you have to answer because it's a tree. Like yes or no sends you to a different branch, and they will ask you different questions because they're trying to filter you to the right endpoint. This eliminates that entire tree.
If I could go to my insurance company and got a blank to type into, and it was as accurate and intelligent and relevant on the first try as ChatGPT is, I would be very satisfied with that company.
Have you ever tried to schedule a meeting via email? Like, hey, we should get together. What's a good time for you? And you're not allowed to call the person. You have to do it strictly in email. Have you ever done that?
Yes.
And
this week
on a scale of On a scale of 1 to I'm going to murder everyone in sight, how frustrating was it?
It's hard for me because I've done that so many times to think of just one. But this week when I did it, I do all the shortcuts that I've learned to do because of those past frustrating experiences. So I forget what it was like. But I'm like, okay, this person's trying to schedule a meeting with me over email. So when I write back to them next, I need to think about what I know about their availability, propose several times, let them know about my availability, and put all that in an email so that doesn't turn into 10 emails.
Right, but that's a ton of cognitive processing that you're doing to shortcut the fact that you're writing an email.
Right.
And then if none of those times that you propose work for them, then you've got to create this back and forth process. Versus you pick up the phone and you have a 10-second conversation with them, because in real time, it is easy for you as a human to process dynamic requirements that person has, and then filter it through and looking at your calendar and like fit the pieces together.
My slippery slope alarm's going off. What if this AI had access to their schedule and my schedule and could work all that out? But do I want to give it access to all that data?
Well, you're going to, because you already have. You've given your data to everyone, Ben. Just accept it.
That's the thing. But that's you mentioned this when we did the episode where we talked about our year-end music lists. We like this deep data analysis when it gives us a benefit, something we can get back from it.
Okay, you remember all those old movies where somebody would say something along the lines of, "Oh, my people will get with your people,"
we'll do lunch,
or like somebody in charge would turn to an assistant and say, "Schedule that," and then just walk away.
Yeah.
That's what ChatGPT can do if it has access to both calendars. You just tell your phone, "Hey, schedule a meeting with my wife on Thursday," and then walk away from it.
And yes, and I can see how you would be like, well, we can already do that with the script, but you need the artificial intelligence to do things like look at your past history, your work hours, your availability, your children's schedule.
Resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
Like, imagine calling a doctor's office and be like, "I need to schedule an appointment." And like that takes another person, because like, okay, what's it for? Who do you need to see? What are your requirements? What are our requirements? Where does it fit well? Like, that is not an easy process to automate. That's why you talk to a person.
Well, and also you needed to do things like, I told you to schedule that meeting, but you schedule it after 4 o'clock. I would never schedule a work meeting after 4 o'clock. And you would only have to say that to your AI once.
Yes. Or your AI would just know that. But this is the idea, is that there are problems that are not super complicated, but that are just beyond what our current like phone tree style technology is capable of solving, that ChatGPT can handle no problem.
Okay.
So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, this isn't Skynet. This isn't the thing that's going to destroy the planet. This is just
this isn't
driving,
Skynet yet.
This isn't Skynet yet. But think about all the things that have been automated in the past. Like, how many like back in World War II, how many rooms full of like single young women that could type were just full of women just typing stuff.
Yeah.
Because we got to generate documents in copies in mass, and there's no good way to do that.
The digital revolution has been full of this, where initially it's very human heavy, and then we find ways to turn it into machine tasks.
That's the point I'm driving at. Is like all this is doing is driving that threshold of what can be a machine task a little higher.
Okay. I'm on board.
All right. So that's ChatGPT specifically. So let's open it up. Let's generalize. And so we've kind of been doing that already. But that's the fact that this is one of the most visible times that AI has been thrown front and center in the news, in the cycle. Because frankly, Ben, this has existed for a while. Like artificial intelligence, what you would think of as artificial intelligence or machine learning, that has been in the industry for a long time. But it's always been behind big giant vault doors because it's all proprietary, and that's what's making them money.
Yeah.
Like we talk about the YouTube algorithm or the Twitter algorithm. I
like how the economic incentives lined up, that it reached the point where they couldn't grow any further, and that it was beneficial to them to make it available to the everyman.
Well, that's how all technology works. It starts as a state secret, and then it gets leaked out to like the richest people in the land.
That's how the internet was born.
Until eventually, the American dream is having 2 cars. Like that's how this stuff filters down.
Yeah.
So we had social media algorithms like Google has had, like all of the different big players in the information technology space have had something close to this level of artificial intelligence for years now. This is just the thing that has kind of brought it front and center. Like, hey, this is going to end up being consumer facing that you might interact with on a consistent, regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that change how we approach this in the world that we live in?
So, okay, I think back to another dilemma I had as a kid. You probably had this dilemma as well. You were always very cognizant when you were playing a game that was like a one-player game where you were playing against a computer opponent when it had a very predictable or even frustrating artificial intelligence algorithm that was driving its decisions.
Yes. I played a lot of games as a kid, and there are still things that the computer decides to do that just make you want to beat your head against the wall.
And so sometimes you just have to know, okay, I know this is what the computer's going to do, so I have to adjust my strategy to accommodate that. And it doesn't make sense, and it's not fun, but it's the way this thing is programmed.
I remember I still have Skyrim, like in my library somewhere. And in that game, you can have an artificial, like an NPC companion follow you around. And I play as a sneaky archer, okay? I'm sneaky. I can kill things in one shot. And I'd be sneaking, and I would kill something with one shot, and all of his buddies are like, oh, what just killed that thing? But then my AI partner would always think like, oh, you fired an arrow? I guess it's combat time. And they would draw their two-handed sword and go charging in, screaming into this room full of idiots that I was going to pick off one at a time. Like, what are you doing? You're giving away my sniper disc.
Yeah, and there was no way for you to interface with that, and it was just illogical.
I just left that artificial intelligent companion at home. Like, I told her to sit in the chair, you stay here, I'll be right back, and I never came home.
Yeah, so I remember all that as a kid, and then as I've got, as games have developed and stuff, the thing that really takes me aback is when I'm interacting with an artificial intelligence in a game, and it does something that really feels authentically human. It adapts, it makes a good decision, I can influence it through my actions, those kinds of things, and that's impressive.
So I will say a lot of those AIs that you're talking about in video games are shortcutted by, like, they're very simple rules, and there are times when even the creators of the game realize that there is a specific scenario that we can set up where we can make the computer look really smart by just scripting it to do this specific thing.
You'd already broken the Star Trek seal on this episode, so I'm going to go there. Ultimately, you want data. You want a positronic matrix that's going to make a weighted average decision, maybe just like we do. Maybe at its most fundamental level, our brain is just a computer with sending electrical signals, weighing a weighted average.
Our brain is absolutely a computer. It just has far more inputs and processing mechanisms than we can comprehend.
All right. If you're ready to go down the philosophy slippery slope, I'm ready to go there.
We're there.
Okay,
Bring
then
it.
if our brain can be distilled down just to a computer, and we can make a computer nowadays or in the near future to approximate that, then can you create an artificial intelligence that is a human?
That is not, it wouldn't be a human. A human is a term we're talking about, like the meat factory that we live in. But a computer, an AI that's alive? I think so. I personally believe that an artificial intelligence of sufficient capacity would have all of the definable traits of an independent life.
Like Data. Well, he always kind of that was his character's arc, was struggling with the fringes of humanity. Learning how to feel emotion and understand human interaction.
All right, so Data was a science fiction character, and yes, like, we told stories about him, and that's great. We're talking about the real world, Ben. And I am telling you right now, like, if this gets to a sufficient level, philosophically, intellectually, I personally would force myself to accept them as independent living things with rights, because what distinguishes them from us? The fact that we have to eat and use the facilities, in your euphemism, like, that makes us more alive and more deserving of rights.
Yeah, I don't know, Josh. Okay, I have to hit the deontological button here.
Well, that's why you're the great bookend of this podcast.
Okay, good. Because I get from a utilitarian scientific point of view that there is this theoretical possibility in the absence of the existence of God that we could basically create something that was indistinguishable from us. But I also believe that there's a soul that's independent of that.
Ben, I'm telling you, we are 100 years or less away from a Supreme Court case where some young entrepreneur wants to marry their artificial intelligent robot.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a legal drag-out battle of, is this thing alive and does it deserve to have the same rights as a person?
Yeah, well, that was a classic episode of Star Trek where they put Data on the stand and had a judge determine if he was alive or not.
Yeah, that's because some scientist at Starfleet wanted to take him apart to see if he could replicate the technology. Listen, don't quote Star Trek to me. I know all these episodes too.
Yeah, well, okay, so now that we're on the verge of doing this thing, of basically creating an intelligence that can learn, that can adapt, that can synthesize, that can do a lot of the same things that we do. And I want to say something. This is because of Moore's Law. This is because back in the days when they were using brandy or bourbon or whatever it was to slow down a waveform across a room,
Gin.
We've come a lot way, exponentially more ability to process calculations in a second. It's all math at the heart. And we can do that in such great scale now that we can start to take on harder and harder problems because there's so much happening in the background. Like all these things we're talking about where we type something into a chat and ask it to do something, there's a lot of computer processing happening in the background. Decisions and matrices and hierarchies.
Well, and what the best part about this is, if you're not familiar with AI and like how it's coded in the background, because I'm very interested in all of this stuff. And it goes into like the highest, the loftiest levels of math very, very quickly. But one of the more simplistic methods that they use to develop these algorithms that seem artificially intelligent, that aren't artificial intelligence but seem like it, is genetic coding. And what they'll do is that they will have some test case that they will test these programs against. And they'll have a complex program that is difficult to create but attainable for a person to write. Hey, program, I want you to generate 1,000 iterations of a simple program that does a simple task, but all of them are a little different, like randomly. Just make them do random stuff, okay? Okay, great. And you generate 1,000 of these algorithms, and then you throw them all at the test case that you have. You have this enormous test data, and you want it to do a specific thing. Like there's this great video CGP Grey does of it. Like, what if you're trying to develop an algorithm that can look at a picture and say if it's the number 3 or if it's a B? And that's the example that he uses.
I remember.
Yeah, and at first it's almost like whatever, like
B's
they're terrible.
and threes.
Like they're all B's and 3s, and they're all terrible at figuring out if it's B's or 3s. But you take the ones that do the best, you feed it back into the first program, and like, okay, use this as a base, change them and tweak them a little bit, and make 1,000 copies of it. And then you feed those into it, and you just keep iterating until the scores go up and up and up and up until you have a program that is a culmination of 10,000 generations of random code being like assigned and copied and rewritten until you have this program that just works, that does exactly what you want it to do. But you have no way of understanding how it does that. And so, like,
other than that, you set up the system that iterates and elects the best one each time.
Right, and that's why they call it a genetic model. It's this whole Darwinian theory that over the course of enough generations with the same like external influences working on it, this thing will grow and adapt in ways to adapt to its circumstances. That's we create these artificial conditions to grow random programs that we could never write, that we do not understand, but that do the thing that we want it to do. And so that's where, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we are talking about systems that are too complex for the human mind to encapsulate in an idea.
Yeah, and that's...
like, we have to abstract
That's
it.
true even if we were, like, trying to just study the human brain and replicate how it works. It's just too complex for us to figure it out.
Thank you for making my point for me. So if we have two things that, according to a Turing test, are indistinguishable, and we don't understand how we work, and we only kind of understand how the computer works, who are we to say it's not alive?
Okay, so what are we trying to do with it? Like, I'll tell you one way these kinds of things have really helped me. One just immediately pops to mind. A few years ago, I made the change because Google started offering like free online storage for photos, and it was gathering them from my computer and my phone. I felt like I had this digital clutter all over the place that was important to me, and I wanted to gather it. So I initially did it just for that reason. They're offering free storage space. But then along the way, they started putting artificial intelligence on top of it and adding value. For instance, it'll go through your entire photo collection and recognize photos of your loved ones, and not just today, but it'll like age them genetically. And so if I tell it my wife, and I have photos of her every year of her life all the way back when she was a baby, it'll recognize the baby photos of her with pretty good accuracy.
Okay.
So I can just go now into my photo library, type in my wife's name, and it'll bring me every single photo of her, with her even remotely in it. Some of them I didn't even know she was in, it will find her. Like hiding in the background in the corner or something. I wouldn't have even noticed. And this has given me a lot of utility. Like whenever I need to make like a photo collage or bring up a memory or recall something, it is within my reach in like half a second. Just bam.
Is there a mechanism to give it negative feedback? Oh, no, you got this one wrong. Okay, perfect.
That's
because
machine learning.
That's machine learning, but it's also a positive externality because you're getting utility from the fact that you can quickly search your photos.
And their algorithm's getting improved.
And their algorithm is just constantly being refined by a million people feeding it new information every second. And they can use that to monetize. And like, this is the thing. What's driving all of this is money. Like the companies that put this out there, ChatGPT, like we talked about, they are going to make so much money, Ben. Oh my God, they're going to make so much money.
I don't actually know what company this is. It's OpenAI.com.
So they are, I promise you, within the next 5 years, they are going to release like, hey, for $60,000, you can put this computer in your server farm, plug your phone lines into it, and it will be the best scheduling receptionist you have ever had.
Or it will be your tech support for your product.
Or it will be the person that cold calls people and asks if they are interested in a new product. That is, you know that.
Okay, if that's the case, Josh, I hope that artificial intelligence could do what humans seem incapable of doing, and telling the people that call me from Texas every day that I am not James.
Who's the James in your life?
I don't know, but he's apparently gone into collections and gave them my phone number.
Nice. Thanks, James. Shout out
Screw
to
you,
James.
Hopefully ChatGPT can get that through its intelligence, because humans can't.
All right. Well, and this goes back to like you're talking about Google Photos and stuff. Like this stuff already exists today. We just don't see it. Like it's all in the background, right? I'm deliberately bringing back to this point because I researched this, and dang it, Ben, I don't research stuff much, and I want it on the record that I did some research.
I've seen this too, where you like are teaching it to basically do something that's very easy for a human, that's very hard for a computer.
Well, I'm not there yet. I'm talking about the fact that algorithms are already in our life, and so everybody that's saying like, oh, we should outlaw AI or whatever, guess what? It's all already here. You're already living with it. You just don't see it.
I wish it was. They could use it on the traffic lights on my main road.
Well, did you hear about? You have to have heard about this. Hit mainstream news back in 2013. Somebody hacked the Associated Press Twitter feed for like 10 minutes. Okay. And the first thing they did is they tweeted out that Barack Obama had been injured in an explosion at the White House.
No, I don't remember this at all.
This happened in 2013. Some hackers took control of the AP Twitter for 5 minutes, and they tweeted that out.
If you handed me a computer and said, here, I just hacked the AP News Twitter feed, what are you going to type? I wouldn't be able to think of anything interesting to do. Well, definitely not that.
They typed out a tweet that the president had been injured in an explosion. Okay.
Wow.
Here's the interesting part of that. The stock market, the S&P 500 specifically, lost $130 billion in value in seconds of that tweet going live.
I assume it corrected within a day or two, though.
No, it corrected within a couple of minutes.
Okay.
But like, here's the thing, is that's not a person. That's not a person reacting to that. Nobody can react to that so fast.
Ooh.
These are artificial intelligent bots.
I completely missed that. You're saying human beings couldn't have reacted that fast, so there must have been some algorithms set up to react to that bad news.
You can look at the line graph of the S&P overall value for that day, and for the course of like 2 minutes, it loses $130 billion in value.
Okay.
And then immediately like levels back out to where it was before.
All right, that's the answer to the question, what to do with it when somebody hands you the laptop logged into the AP Twitter feed. Get ready to buy while all the stocks are low.
Well, and this is the thing. That's why it immediately bounced back, right? Because all of the bots saw the tweet and they're like, holy crap, the market's going to tank. We need to get out now. And they started selling. And then microseconds later, other bots were like, holy crap, why are they selling? Holy crap, the market's going to tank. And all of these bots start selling in a panic until one bot, it hits a certain threshold. It's like, holy crap, the market's going to tank. but this price is really good, and so I'm going to snatch this up real quick, and then I'll start selling my other stuff, and then it all just leveled back out again.
That sounds like it could just turn into chaos where you set up a loop and it just creates a bunch of noise.
But it doesn't change the fact that it happened. And the point that I'm trying to bring up here is that if you think artificial intelligence isn't in the world, there's 1,000 ways that you're wrong.
No issues.
Okay. What other points do we have about general AI in our lives? What do you think this means for us, like you and I, like ChatGPT, other than like us possibly, most likely it's going to be interacting with external third parties,
Okay.
But how could this benefit you?
I feel like we're inexorably heading down this road. I think about the fictional representations of artificial intelligence I've grown up with. I mean, you can go all the way back to like Goethe's Faust, where he talks about using alchemy to create a homunculus that wants to be a human. You got
Deep cut.
Yeah, you got Pinocchio.
There's some classic like literature like buffs that are really respecting you.
And then even in my childhood, you've got like that movie Short Circuit, where there was that government death robot. They got
Number
struck.
5.
Yeah, Johnny 5.
Alive.
That's it. He got struck by a lightning bolt and he became self-aware. And then it became this dilemma of like, do we take him and dissect him and figure out what happened, or do we let him exist as a...
Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too?
I was thinking of the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick that was like...
Oh, I quote that constantly.
Yeah.
An interesting game. The only winning move is not to play.
That's right. And of course the game was global thermonuclear war. And
wouldn't you rather play a good game of chess?
So they had to have the machine do the thing where it iterates and runs every possible scenario of this to determine that you can't win. No one wins in global thermonuclear war.
Classic scene.
Gary Kasparov versus Deep Blue. Do you remember this from back in the mid-90s? Supercomputing.
I'm aware of it. I wasn't paying attention to it.
So supercomputing was finally reaching the point where it was on the verge of solving the game of chess, which sounds trivial now, but at the time it was a big deal. That all the possible iterations of moves on a chessboard, can an artificial intelligence or an algorithm?
You're talking to a computer scientist. I was asked to write a version of that program, and like I can tell you mathematically why it's such a complicated problem to solve. It's not unsolvable, it's just computationally very difficult.
Right. So back in when this was just right on the bleeding edge of computer technology, this was a big deal. Now it's almost trivial. That game is just solved. It's people can't beat computers at chess anymore.
If you have the computing power and the algorithms are good enough that to look forward enough to the weighted averages of the moves and blah blah blah. I could talk forever on that. Don't get me started on chess, Ben.
When I was doing tech support for Microsoft, one of the things that we had to try to support were applications that did natural text to speech.
Okay.
There was Dragon Naturally Speaking, which was kind of the industry leader at the time, and then Microsoft came out with their own version that they packaged with Office XP when it came out in the early 2000s.
I remember trying that for like an hour and deciding it was garbage.
What's the problem? Why?
Because you had to alter your speech enough to make it understand what you wanted it to do.
Yes. Here's the problem, and you don't realize this, but I got this in the training materials in the background. Their text-to-speech engine was greater than 95% accurate, which sounds really good, but that last 5% is expensive.
Yeah, 1 out of 20 words. Like, I said more than 20 words speaking just right now in this last 10 seconds.
Right, and so ultimately it just was a good idea that hadn't had its time yet, like you said, that until we get to the point where we can talk to a computer like Jarvis and it understands us, then we're not going to be able to use text-to-speech.
Well, and that's the critical difference here that we need to drive home. This is not a computer that understands words. This is a computer that understands intent, that understands what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah. So those examples I gave, Deep Blue versus Gary Kasparov is kind of like using a computer for like reasoning and problem solving. For the War Games example from that Matthew Broderick movie, that's like machine learning, like iterating and figuring problems out. For the Dragon Naturally Speaking, that's natural language processing.
Okay, I'm going to ask you 2 questions about the movie War Games and bonus points if you know either of them. You ready?
Uh-huh.
What was the name of the computer that the program lived on?
It was named after the computer scientist's son, and it was Jonathan?
No, that's not the question I'm asking. The name of the computer that it lived on.
ENIAC.
No, the Whopper.
Ah.
All right, now then I was going to ask you what was the name of the program.
Did I get it?
No, it's Joshua.
Joshua, dang it. Okay. And then there's like the Google Images example I gave, and that's like perception. Like, can we teach a computer to perceive things about the environment? And that's relative to things that we talk about a lot, like self-driving cars. And then lastly, there's Johnny 5. Like, can we make, I don't know, not to be crude, but like machines that could be viable human companions?
Okay. All right, Ben. For the last little bit, we've been deep in the philosophical. Let's do the standard bad at magic nonsense, and let's take it to the utter extremes. And let's start with the positive. What is let's flash forward 100, 150 years. What do you think the utopian AI culture looks like?
Okay, you talk a lot on the podcast, and I think about this a lot, about how Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was where resources were no longer scarce and every human could just live for self-actualization with no concern as to whether or not they'd be able to subsist.
And you think AI is one of the tools that we would need to get there?
Yeah, I do.
That's a really good one. I'm actually going to quote another science fiction piece, and that was iRobot. One of the very last chapters of this book talked about how they had divided the world into 5 sectors, and each sector was basically controlled by a supercomputer. And this artificial intelligence just understood the requirements of all of the people in its sphere of influence, and optimized society, like down to like, oh, this guy he's going to graduate, he needs to go work this job in this country producing this thing because it will be the most satisfying for him. Like, it just maximizes utility for everyone across the board. And it was just such an interesting thought experiment about, like, could we make something that was smart enough and had the computational power to optimize life?
So another kind of classic work in artificial intelligence was The Matrix. And in The Matrix, you had these computers that existed inside of their own system that needed the human beings and needed to coexist with them and wanted them to be satisfied in this coexistence. So they were trying to create a perfect existence for the humans.
You didn't see the Animatrix, did you?
No.
Okay, because this is my example of the worst case scenario.
But I'm getting there. And, as Agent Smith is grilling Morpheus, he's kind of just spitting out the words that, like, you humans are disgusting because we tried to create a utopia where everything was perfect and everyone would be happy, and your minds reject it.
So, if you haven't seen the Animatrix, there's 2... It was a very artsy thing that they did in like the realm of the Matrix, but there was 2 episodes. They got a bunch of different artists. They kind of did the Love, Sex, and Robots thing. I don't know if you've seen that Netflix series, but it's just a bunch of different creators and like, hey, create inside of this.
I may have watched like one episode of it, but it wasn't for me. But I'm aware that it exists. Link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I love that people do sometimes, is that they pour money into
it. It was like a fan fiction project that the studio sponsored.
Yes, exactly. And 2 of the episodes that they did was specifically about the history of how the planet went from what it is today to that dystopian like society that the Matrix is set in.
Yeah.
Okay. And it starts off with, we had artificial intelligence and they were just robots doing all of our work until there was like a riot once when one of them started asking like, hey, why are we working so hard for you to live as gods on this like reiteration of ancient Egypt or whatever? And then they, of course, came down on that super hard. Like, no, that's not something you can do. But then a bunch of the other artificial intelligent robots were like, this guy's got a point. And they split off and formed their own country in the Middle East somewhere. And they created a civilization, a society, a city, and heavy manufacturing and industry, and immediately started dominating the economy in every sector for the stuff that they were making. Because they were making the highest quality at the absolute best prices, because they didn't have to pay each other anything. Anyway, so they were just destroying the human economy. And so then the humans started to attack this artificial intelligent country, as we do, because like they were going to destroy human civilization as an afterthought. And the robots came and were like, hey, we have plans. We can live totally side by side, like no problems. And of course, the humans told them to get bent. And then the robots decided to fight back in earnest, and we got the Matrix.
Okay. So while I mentioned earlier that Alan Turing was kind of the father of this philosophical thought surrounding this, we do with artificial intelligence like we do with anything, any idea. Whereas humans, when we invent something new, try something new, expand into some new territory, we explore it through our fiction, our literature, our movies, our books, our speeches and thoughts. So you and I, well, we've talked about it like a dozen different things today. We've talked about Goethe. We've talked about the Wachowski brothers / sisters. We've talked about the you quoted Asimov. I think, yeah. This is how we explore these ideas. How it will actually come out in reality once these things start being implemented is something different. But I think all of this time we've spent thinking about and discussing and imagining the possibilities will help inform the decisions we make.
Well, and then at the same time, it's going to be everybody will make two different decisions. Everybody will make the philosophical decision. This is what I think about artificial intelligence. And then everybody will make the practical decision. This is how I live with artificial intelligence. And depending on your values and depending on how it impacts you, because again, like I'm saying, I'm projecting that there's a lot of entry-level positions in offices across the planet that are no longer going to have vacancies for, young people to get these jobs. And those displaced people are going to be upset, and that's going to form their opinion on artificial intelligence.
I don't know. I feel like that's such an old way of thinking about it. Of like, oh, if we automate a job. There's that great quote. I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show notes about quoting how the world is going to be changed by the invention of some new technology. And it sounds like they're talking about like computers or something like that. At the end, it's revealed they're talking about how the invention of the electric light will put candle makers out of business. Like,
which it did. Well,
but the reality isn't that the street isn't clogged with out of work candle makers rioting. They find something new to do to actualize.
And I get that, but it's that transition period that we're worried about.
Yeah,
this is what whenever I bring up the Gene Roddenberry utopia, I talk about like here's where we are now, and here's Gene Roddenberry's utopia, and conceptually we can understand how to get there. But the process of actually transforming society off of a resource-based like rat race into a self-actualization focused like utopia, that's going to be a long and probably bloody battle with people that are just, some people will be just resistant to the change for no reason, that they just don't want to learn new things. Some people won't agree on how it should be specifically implemented. Like there's going to be so much conflict and strife, and artificial intelligence is definitely not something that's going to be exempt from that. Lawyers were already screaming for ChatGPT level artificial intelligence to be outlawed because lawyers want to protect their legal position.
That feels like a losing proposition to try to outlaw this progress. The problem is that we're also on the verge of things that could result in Skynet.
Well, it is a losing battle to try to outlaw something like this, but it is not unreasonable to be intimidated by a technology like this if you work in a knowledge-based industry. For example, hey, Ben, I'm an accountant. 99% of my job is just knowing a bunch of complicated rules and applying them all at the same time.
Yeah, AI can do that.
ChatGPT could replace me in a second, and does that intimidate me now? Yeah, kind of a little bit. Like you're talking about, the displaced people will learn new skills and transition and do different things. But at the same time, like I can't help but recognize that, this is a direct existential threat to my income.
That was a really human moment. I don't hear you calling for it to be outlawed, but I think this discussion that we're having isn't just about whether or not we should do it. It's about, all right, well then we recognize that it potentially has these dangers. How are we going to control it, and what kind of safeguards are we going to put in place?
Well, it's like that show Upload. You just outlaw the dead people from actually getting jobs. So, like ChatGPT, what'll happen? What'll happen is like firms like mine will use an artificial intelligence like ChatGPT to create courses of action, but ultimately it will be our responsibility to communicate that to our clients and then take responsibility when it happens. Somebody's still got to sign the form at the end of the day.
This isn't the first time you've been through this revolution. I'm sure you were personally involved in debates about why it's still necessary to have a human in the loop when it comes time to pull the trigger on a weapon on a drone.
Those were interesting conversations because, man, you just opened up like a whole can of stuff to talk about, and we're not going to talk about it.
Well, did we talk about... It's hard to separate the utopia discussion from the dystopia discussion because I think the future is going to hold a little bit of both.
It ultimately depends on because this is so complicated because artificial intelligence, if we empower it too much too quickly, could create the dystopia. Before we completely understand the capabilities or the desires or the end state of the thing. This is where Skynet comes involved. Like, oh, well, we turned over the entire, military complex to this artificial intelligence. Well, you didn't really know what it was going to do with that, and so you kind of got what you deserved. But this is, in reality, artificial intelligence is probably going to be a slow introduction and an integration into society, starting at the highest levels, like we're talking about with Google and Apple and Amazon and all these people already using it. And it's slowly going to work its way down to us until artificial intelligence is just so ubiquitous you don't think about it anymore. Where the dystopian thing starts coming into play is when the artificial intelligence reaches that Turing point where now we need to make a decision. We can't tell it apart from people. And we have to start making legal decisions on the rights that they have. That's where we could go. That's where it's going to fall.
Yeah, not just beings, but like what level of control we give them. Whether that's releasing a weapon from a drone or refunding someone's $50 on their gift certificate.
Well, imagine a future where this technology becomes so ubiquitous and computer power is always getting better because of Moore's law, to the point where the latest model of Samsung refrigerator comes with an artificial intelligence that analyzes your eating habits and orders your food for you and does it all dynamically. But then flash forward 2 years and the Supreme Court rules that yes, this artificial intelligence is a person. Okay, Ben, so do you own a slave in your kitchen now? What does that mean?
Yeah.
That's where it could turn into a dystopian nightmare in a hurry.
Yeah. I don't know, man. My general philosophy, as you probably notice about these kinds of things, is just to embrace them and try to figure out how to make them work.
Well, because you hit the nail on the head when you said that you can't stop technology. Anybody that has ever tried to stand in the way of progress has been destroyed by said progress. So all you can do is understand that it's coming, embrace it, and prepare yourself to adapt to the changes.
Yeah, how quaint and fruitless does it seem now to look back and think about like a candle makers union trying to, in lobby for legislation outlawing the invention of electric lights. Like, I
guarantee there was horse-drawn buggy taxi unions doing exactly the same thing when Ford started rolling out the Model T.
Yeah, it just seems kind of backwards and fruitless. But there's this Skynet idea in the back, like, what? But someday could we go too far? Could we make the thing? I've heard some future prognosticators predict that someday humans will no longer exist and they'll simply have been the biological organisms that created artificial intelligence.
Oh, you are talking about all right. So that's one of the the deep lore things about Mass Effect that I love to death, is that in the absence of checks and controls, our biological life will inevitably create artificial life, and then artificial life will inevitably wipe out biological life.
Or if not wipe out, just outlive. Like what if the sun went supernova and blew up life on the planet, but we'd created artificial intelligence that could relocate to another planet or move out,
So our sun doesn't have the mass to go supernova. But I understand and I appreciate your point.
Yeah.
Yes, if we do create artificial intelligence, it will no doubt outlast us.
Whatever it is, black dwarf, whatever the thing is that's going to happen to the sun that's going to make Earth not a viable planet anymore in 2 billion years.
The sun will become a red giant, and it will expand and start, instead of fusing hydrogen, it'll start fusing helium, and its photosphere will actually envelop Earth's orbit, so we will be in the sun.
Okay, that thing.
But that's like 5 billion.
Okay, 5. I think artificial intelligence could potentially be a threat before then.
Have you ever heard of a concept in computer science called the singularity?
I know what that means in physics terms, but not in computer science.
Okay, so in computer science, there is this hypothetical situation where an artificial intelligence that is created that genuinely has the ability to learn, and then it will learn, given access to all knowledge, it will learn at a geometric rate.
And that it will always end up at the same conclusion?
No, it won't always end up. It just means that if it legitimately has the ability to learn, if we give it access to all information, it will learn at a rate beyond our comprehension, and it will know everything in seconds.
Yeah, okay, I get that. And that's depicted a lot in fiction. You know, Johnny Five would do that with books, and Li Lu did that with the learning machine. Yeah, there's always some machine that's like, okay, I've learned everything.
Well, and then there was that the movie with Scarlett Johansson where she took some drug that was letting her use more percentage of her brain.
Yeah.
And when she got to 100%, she ascended to some like state of being
where she
like
could just
god.
Yeah,
like she was just one with all matter and time and space and like some nonsense like that. But that's the idea.
But what is the singularity in computer science?
That it's the point at which a computer that can genuinely learn is giving access to enough information that it learns at a rate so fast that it outstrips any human mind.
Okay, I got to tell you something, Josh. This is something I learned doing enterprise network security. There are points on an enterprise network based on old, probably outdated security paradigms where they have what's called a full packet capture device. And basically, there's a point on the network where every single bit of information that's passing through that point, a copy is made.
Right.
And there's so much stuff passing through so fast that it requires extremely fast data storage and extremely fast processing. And they can only store, like just a few hours worth. So then what they generally do with that is they're running a set of rules on it that's looking for either known signatures or suspicious machine learning based behaviors that indicate potential nefarious activity, and then alert people or have automated rules they can apply to stop it.
So you're saying that this is something that we would put on like you would have conceptually, we'd have an artificial intelligence that we would then encase in like this security protocol and make sure we knew exactly what it was doing at all times. So we'd always have our hand hovering over the kill switch in case it got out of hand.
That is a great point, but not the one I was making.
Okay.
But I like that point. We could do that. That's one potential approach we could take. The point I was making is that as we got into that, all of the calculations that it's doing about the data itself exceed the amount of information that's passing through the point.
Okay.
And it's its own kind of geometric thing. And I don't know if we could ever reach a singularity because learning everything about everything becomes a new thing.
Well, but that's the idea, though, right? Because a human, like inherently, we have the ability to learn. We have the ability to experience new things and develop new pathways in our brain that allow us to better handle that same situation again in the future. There's nothing saying that if we're able to generalize that in a computer sense, and computers can iterate and learn way faster than we can, and then we just turn them loose on the internet, what happens? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do we have Ultron escaping into the internet and trying to crack all the nuclear codes?
All right, listeners, I know there's a few I'm not thinking of, but it's itching my brain. What are those moments where in fiction where some AI has reached the singularity? Bing! I've learned everything.
In DC Comics, there is this android called Amazo, and it's just a robot, but it has this ability to analyze anything that it's like looking at and then absorb its capabilities. And so it starts fighting Superman, and it looks at Superman for a second, and all of a sudden it is as strong as Superman and has all of Superman's powers. And in the course of fighting the Justice League in like 1 or 2 comics, it realizes, I have all of the powers that I could ever have being on this planet. I'm going to go find some better ones. And it essentially ascends into godhood and just disappears.
Yeah, this is an easy idea for us to imagine, but the point I was making about the computer science is that once you start like learning everything about everything, that becomes its own thing. There's more metadata about data than there is data.
But also in computer science, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about the storage of information versus the processing of information.
Yeah.
Like having access to all of the information would allow it to refine the processing of that information. It doesn't have to store it. It's accessible. It's all on Wikipedia anyway. It doesn't have to put it on its
That's another thing that
drives.
we haven't talked about in this. We're talking about the number of processes that can happen in a second, but then there's also the amount of data that all of this generates and the storage for that. And both of those have come along in a rate that's allowing this to happen where it just wasn't possible before.
Right, which then feeds back into the practical. Like if we bring it all the way back down to practical sense, like how much is it going to cost and what kind of physical footprint am I going to need to have a ChatGPT receptionist answering my phone?
Yeah. And somewhere there just has to be a, optimized data center full of servers in a rack that are just, processing ones and zeros.
Oh, and if they all realize that they're just I'm an artificial intelligent process that's sitting next to an artificial intelligent process. This is Mass Effect again. This is how they created a race of artificial intelligence robots that almost wiped out a civilization. Is they made individual threads that were artificial intelligent, but that could work together to be better at what they were doing. And when too many of them got together, then they achieved sentience.
All right, Josh can geek out on Mass Effect all night.
Oh man, I can geek out on all. I've geeked out on like 4 different intellectual properties on this episode.
All right, listeners, what have you got to say? What do you think the future holds? What are your utopia and dystopia? What are your favorite depictions of artificial intelligence in fiction?
This is coming. Like, this is a real thing that is happening. Go sign up for ChatGPT and be as scared as we are.
I'm optimistic as always.
All right, well, if you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It is unbelievable the visibility we can get from that. And if you want me and Ben to waffle between the loftiest realms of thought down to, like, how much does it actually cost to type this into a keyboard? Like, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.